Welcome to the Falmouth Chamber of Commerce.
The Falmouth Chamber is dedicated to working on behalf of our members to make Falmouth a better place to live, work, and conduct business. We are committed to developing the economic, cultural, educational, and civic interests of our community and welcome the support from all organizations to achieve our combined goals. Whether you call Falmouth home, are a summer resident, or a visitor, we hope you take advantage of all that the Chamber has to offer.
Nestled in a classic New England setting, amid 200-year-old elm trees and charming colonial homes, stately sea captains' homes, and charming Cape Cod salt boxes, Shoreway Acres is a graceful blend of Cape Cod's past and present. Shoreway Acres, proud sponsor of Falmouth Community Television.
Green Harbour Waterfront Lodging is nestled in a woodland setting on a picturesque ocean inlet. Green Harbour offers a family waterfront vacation. Enjoy our private boating beach with dock, rowboats, and paddle boats, oversized heated outdoor pool, and kiddie pool. Relax in our waterfront and beachside accommodations. 548-4747 or gogreenharbor.com. People think that a locally owned and operated appliance store may not offer what they need. Actually, we have trained and dedicated sales associates, expert delivery and installation, professional repair service, and personal customer service. Plus, we have access to a huge local warehouse with over 6,000 models in stock. Crane Appliance. We call the Cape and Islands home. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs. 508-548-7303 or toll free at 1-800-696-7303. Our email address is carlsonprinting@aol.com. Carlson Printing for all your printing needs.
Hosting services for fctv.org are provided by Meganet Communications. Meganet offers a wide array of internet services, including Mega Backup Cloud Service, server co-location, T1, fiber, Metro Ethernet, as well as telephone services such as hosted PBX and digital voice. Their number one goal is to keep your communications network up and running and allow you to focus on growing your business. 877-634-2638 or meganet.net.
The Quarterdeck Restaurant, located on Main Street in the heart of Falmouth, specializing in fresh local seafood and other classic American cuisine, featuring a full bar with friendly staff. And the Bucatino Restaurant and Wine Bar, located in North Falmouth just off Nathan Ellis Highway, featuring catering services with 2 full event rooms serving up classic Italian cuisine. The Quarterdeck Restaurant and Bucatino Restaurant and Wine Bar, we're here to serve all our friends in Falmouth.
Suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law 30A 20 relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency. June 1st, 2020 public meeting of the Falmouth Select Board shall be physically closed to the public to avoid group congregation. Alternate public access to this meeting shall be provided in the following manner. The meeting will be televised live at Falmouth Community Television. Real-time public comment can be addressed to the Select Board utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software for remote access. This application will allow users to view the meeting and send comment or question to the chair via the chat function. Submitted text comments will be read into the record at the appropriate points at the meeting. And I don't need to read all the login instructions and all, do I?
No.
Okay. Additional public comments may be set in advance of the meeting. The Select Board of Falmouth, Mass. We know that. Number 4, the applicants, their representatives, and individuals with enforcement matters before the board may appear remotely and are not required to physically be present. Applicants, their representatives, and individuals with enforcement matters before the board may contact the town manager or select board's office to arrange an alternative means of real-time participation if unable to use the Zoom virtual meeting software. Documentary exhibits and our personal visual presentations should be submitted in advance of the meeting to the town manager's office, so they may be displayed to the remote public access viewing. Okay, so I'm called meeting to order, and I guess I would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, if you'll join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we're going to hold off a little while and give Megan a chance to get in, and before we do the reorganization of the board. For recognition today, I'd like to recognize that the governor's office, I think, is doing a pretty good job, and I appreciate the leadership that we're receiving. I'm starting to get a little anxious about the reopening, and I hope it comes quickly, but I think overall we've got good leadership, and I'm appreciative of that. And another thing I'd like to mention for recognition is the not a town issue, but that national issue with the passing of George Floyd and all the crazy rioting that's going on. It's, people are really just really frustrated with this stuff that goes on year after year, and it's not, I don't have a lot to comment, but I just really I feel compassionate for the victim of this. I mean, it's a terrible tragedy. At the same time, I feel compassion for the police departments that have to suffer because of one bad apple, or a few maybe. So it's unfortunate. I'm thankful that at Falmouth we don't seem to have these type of racial divides, and maybe I'm just not as aware of it. I hope it's better than in many places. It was a very peaceful demonstration. I'm told I didn't make it to it. I didn't realize I was working in the garden and I missed it, but I guess it was very nicely demonstrated in Falmouth with support by the police, which is nice. Does anybody else have any more personal knowledge of it? Yes, Doug.
I would just like to comment a little bit on both the vigil and the importance for all of us to step forward to make some changes in this country. It's just completely outrageous, unacceptable what happened out in Minnesota. But what was at all encouraging is what's happening in Falmouth, and the vigil that we had yesterday, the silent vigil for 15 minutes, peaceful, respectful, people wearing masks, socially distancing, and a wide group of people. It was not just the people you'd expect, but I thought it was a fantastic representation of what the town is all about. And I'm really discouraged about what's happening in the country, but I am so proud of the town of Falmouth, the way they step forward, and will continue to do so, and I'm convinced. In the conversation I had with Chief Dunn, the way he feels about everything, I'm just so admiring of that man also, and the way he's going to represent the police department.
Absolutely, very professional. Anybody else want to mention anything for recognition? Nancy?
I was at the vigil as well, and I with everything that Doug just put forward. The one thing that struck me about that vigil was the amount of young people, young people who attended and took it very seriously, and that was something to be very proud of. They're getting the message, and Falmouth is a really great place to be right now.
Glad to hear that. That's very encouraging. I'd like to see young people getting involved in any way. Mm-hmm. Okay, announcements. Does anyone have any announcements they'd like to make? Mr. Suso, anything?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. No announcements on our end. We're all good.
Okay, I can't think of anything right now myself either. We can announce that. Do we know yet the date for town meeting? Has that been established?
Well, we have a recommendation we're bringing forward tonight for Monday, June 22nd at 6 p.m. And if all goes well, moderator David Vieira will also join us for that discussion. He's going to attempt to log in as long as we can help.
All right then. Do we have any public comment on the chat board? Let's take a quick peek here. Hello. No, I don't see any public comment there on the chat board. And just a reminder to folks, any public comment that you have doesn't have to be right at this moment. You can send it to an email to selectmen@falmouthma.gov, and we'll read it into the record if you so request. Should we go on to summary of actions and administrative orders? I guess so. Vote to sign a letter of support for Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness MVP Action Grant application for Woods Hole Sewer Force Main Relocation Evaluation. Is there anyone that wanted to speak to that or from the committee tonight?
I think, Mr. Chairman, we have some information in the board packet, and we had a recommendation from wastewater superintendent Avery Lowell.
Yeah.
And I certainly acknowledge and agree with that recommendation. And I know our wastewater management committee as well. So I certainly encourage the board's consideration of allowing an application to be transmitted.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Certainly, I know this is something that Chair Brown has been supporting us for a long time, looking forward to this. So I would move that we sign the letter in support of the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Action Grant.
Second.
All in favor? Mr. Patterson?
Second, yeah, I guess we have to identify our names.
Yes, sir. And would you, let's by roll call, Mr. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Jones, aye.
And it's Brown eye. So that passes. Thank you. And next we have vote to accept grant funding in the amount of $6,000 from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security Highway Safety Division, Pedestrian Bicycle Safety Enforcement and Equipment. It's my understanding that this will be used by the police department to enforce, for instance, crosswalk safety and bicycle safety in various ways around town. The supplements to manpower. Is that correct, Mr. Suso?
That's correct, Mr. Chairman. This is a basically a formula grant that the town receives every year, and Police Chief Dunn, as you've noted, devotes it to bicycle and pedestrian safety on utilizing our existing police officers.
Very good. Do I have a positive motion?
The nice thing about this grant is I don't think that there's any matching funds required for it, which is rare for many grants. It is a straightforward 6,000 grant to the town. And so therefore I move approval to accept the grant funding amount of $6,000.
Very well.
Jones.
Patterson, second.
Okay, thank you. And by roll call, Ms. Taylor
Aye.
and Mr. Patterson,
Patterson, aye.
Mr. Jones,
Jones, aye.
and it's Brown eye. So that's all set. And then C, approve execution of memorandum of understanding with Cape Light Compact related to Green Communities Initiative. I'm glad to see we're ready to discuss that. Does anybody have any questions or any comments? Mr. Suso?
I have a brief report, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. As you know, we've been anticipating moving in the direction of Green Communities designation, and with the adoption recently by town meeting of the stretch code, it's really opened the door for us to take that next important step. This is a memorandum of understanding with the Cape Light Compact, who had reached out to us and is willing, has their own funding set aside to support communities like Falmouth in securing a Green Communities designation. There is no local match required. And I do want to note for the board that this is not brought to you timely, with my apologies. This is a retroactive request. You see it in your board packet. There was a deadline of May 22nd. It fell in the gap between your last meeting and this one, June 1st tonight, to authorize the MOU to be executed. So I did execute that with the understanding that it would be brought to you at this meeting this evening to affirm your willingness to authorize that to occur. I did speak about it with Selectman Chair Megan English Braga when it became clear that the deadline was going to run afoul of our timing in our select board meeting. So happy to answer any questions that are there, but Tom Bott, as our town planner, will be our primary staff contact with Cape Light Compact, and other staff members will supplement as needed.
I personally feel like you exercise good judgment in moving forward with that, and welcome comments from the board. Mr. Patterson?
Yeah, I think this is very much in the spirit of what town meeting passed when they actually adopted the Green Communities designation for or at least moving in that direction for Falmouth. So I would, well, first, for the sake of discussion, I would move that we accept the memorandum of understanding for this Massachusetts Department of Energy Resources Regional Energy Planning Assistance Grant.
Any other comments from other board members?
1 second.
Any comment or ready to vote? Okay. By roll call then, Mr. Patterson,
Patterson, aye.
Ms. Taylor,
Taylor, I.
Mr. Jones,
Jones, aye.
and Brown, aye. Megan, are you ready to vote on that one?
I listened to it. English Braga, aye. Yes, thank you.
Okay, very good. So we're
Sorry.
good.
Sorry for that, folks.
We're into the next one is authorized application of community development block grant. Would you want to jump back in, Megan, or want me to just keep going?
So this is under D, right?
Yes.
I would encourage you to
Okay.
jump back to the reorganization and then come back to this one, because I think this one might take a little while.
Okay, I think that's a good point.
Okay. Great. So Doug, thank you so much. I know it was really last minute that I asked you to do that. Sorry, it was having a hard time getting away from dinner and kids. So my apologies.
No worries. It's fine.
We thought it was
Appreciate it.
traffic. We thought it was traffic issues.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Tough
Yeah.
commute time. So welcome to Nancy, and congratulations to Nancy and to Sam. And huge thanks to everyone who ran for any position in town. It's such a big deal to put yourself out there and be willing to dedicate the time that the community really needs. So we are really excited for the work that we have ahead. So usually, as we know, that first meeting after the election, we talk about reorganizing the board. We look at both the chair and vice chair positions, and then as well, we take a look at the committee liaison positions and rework some of those. And I believe everyone, Diane Davidson was wonderful in sending out kind of an update of different committees. And so why don't we start with the chair and vice chair, and then we can kind of dive into looking at what committees people are interested in being a liaison to.
Okay.
So does anyone have any? Oh, Doug Jones.
I would move that we appoint Megan English Braga to be chairman of the select board, the town of Falmouth.
Patterson, second.
Any discussion on that?
I'll just throw out there that I sent Megan an email last week asking if she would be willing to continue, and I told her I would support that if she was willing to do so, and she did concur. So I'm all
Yeah,
for it.
thank you. And what I would say is just a reminder to the public, recently in the last few years, we've been doing kind of 2-year cycles, which I think have actually been really helpful for the board. It seems like you get that first year under your belt to just get a sense of how everything works. And having that second year to maybe fine tune, I think has been really helpful. And it was wonderful when I first came on. I think Doug, did you do 2 or 3 years? You said just 2? Yes. And then Sue did 2, and then I would be heading into my second if we vote on that tonight. And it's certainly isn't anything that's etched in stone, and anything can be changed when the board wants to, but it's been sort of the process we've been engaged in, and I think it's been productive.
And I think
Any
the town
other-
has appreciated the learning curve that takes place after the first year to not have
Yes.
to retrain someone a year after that.
Right.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great point, Doug. I think for staff, for Julian, for Diane, Phyllis, Peter, I think it's helpful to not have to repeat all of that initial information. So if there's no further discussion, all those in favor by roll call: Patterson,
Patterson, aye.
Brown,
Brown, aye.
Taylor,
Taylor, I.
Jones.
Jones, aye.
Okay. Thank you all. I would be really honored and pleased to continue in this role. Yes, Sam.
I would move that we appoint Doug Brown to the vice chair position.
Okay, I would second that. Doug has done a really wonderful job and has definitely been someone who does tremendous outreach to folks, and is always one of the first to respond to emails, so that individuals know that we've read them and we're responding and really, taking into account what they're communicating to us. So I would second that. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, English Braga, aye. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Jones?
Jones, aye.
Taylor?
Taylor, I.
Great.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you, guys.
And just as we look at the town committees, I know that Nancy, you had sent me some thoughts about committees that you were interested in.
Mhm.
And were there any, I'm just trying to pull up Diane's list here. What are some folks, let me start with Sam. Sam, the committees that you're on now, can you just note the ones that you're the liaison to?
Sure. The Affordable Housing Committee, the Community Preservation Committee, the Conservation Commission, the Finance Committee, and the School Committee. And I've been on those for 6 years, but I think I have a good working relationship with many of the staff, many of the participants and members of that committee. And we basically share information. I think that's the role of the liaison, is basically to carry information back so that both bodies, the select board and the particular committee, are sort of using the same background, facts, and information.
Mhm. Great.
So
Great point.
I'm happy to continue in that, in those same 5 committees, but I also am open to changes.
Okay. Anyone, I'm just going to do it in this way. Are any of the committees that Sam just mentioned committees that anyone else has a really strong desire to at present be a liaison to? I would say that Sam in general has committees that meet quite frequently, and he does a really great job of attending almost all of those meetings, and when he doesn't, he's in excellent contact. So I would support you keeping those unless and Sam, you're saying that you would like to do that, so unless somebody else has a burning desire for one of those. Doesn't look like it. Okay. And Doug Brown, what are the committees that you are currently a liaison to, and what are your feelings about those?
Well, currently, my assignments are Beach Committee, Coastal Ponds Committee, Planning Board, Town Building Committee, and Waterways Committee. And I'm also not assigned to it, but I work with the Marks Building Committee. Now, 2 of mine are not really active. The Coastal Ponds Committee hasn't met. We're trying to get that reorganized, but not very successful lately. That is having to do with management of moorings and so forth. I do attend the Waterways Committee meetings. And because I've got these couple of meetings that are kind of slack right now, I did talk to Sue Moran about the Assembly Delegate position, and I would be willing to do that position if it was pleasure of the board. So,
okay.
throw
So that
out
might,
there.
so it might make sense for you, because we're going to take a look at that as we go later on. So it might make sense for you to keep the committees that you're in now. Is that what I'm hearing you say, given
It
that
is.
the Assembly would then have a number of meetings?
I've got a little room in my schedule based on the fact that the Coastal Ponds isn't meeting right now. So I'd be willing to do that.
All right. Great. Okay. So we'll leave that issue for now, and then we'll take a look at, let me just scroll over. Sorry. Doug Jones.
Before we move on to me, the only thing I would think that Doug Brown could also be useful is if the Traffic Advisory Committee is actually going to get started. I know that's one that he's done a lot of work with in the past, for him to consider that also, but.
I would definitely be willing to do that.
Okay. Once that gets up and going.
Okay.
Great.
I think
Okay.
another one that's at the county level is the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative. And I was thinking that goes along with the ponds committee that you've been serving on, and you're interested in the Falmouth water stewards.
Yes, sir. That's true.
So you're not
Is
going
that
to have any
something
free time now, Doug.
Yeah, you shouldn't have volunteered.
Yeah. But obviously, I mean, part of it is that at present, and probably for the foreseeable future, meetings are going to be, in a virtual format. It's a little bit of a different situation. Some committees may have a bit of a challenge meeting if not everyone's comfortable or quorum is comfortable with Zoom, although most people are doing it these days. So hopefully they'll be able to meet. But if Doug, if you're happy kind of with those that we just noted in the traffic advisory, once it gets up and going,
Okay.
that would be great.
We ought to
And-
think about whether or not we're going to actually have an official delegate to the fire station search committee. I attended their first one. I did miss their second, and I don't think there was any more meetings after that.
No, I don't think there have been any. And I don't know that we were putting an official delegate, but I think if that's something that you're interested in going to, but maybe if it rotates throughout, it might be, if you can't make everyone and another selectman is able to make it, I think
Right.
that's an important, certainly important issue.
Okay.
And hopefully we'll have coverage for all of those meetings again, once they kind of get up and running again.
Okay.
So, okay. Doug Jones.
The other question I had before is about the EDIC does the member of the EDIC have to be a select board? So does that one also need to be replaced as a new person?
I believe so. And I feel a little bit less suited to EDIC.
That's where I was going to actually encourage Sam Patterson if we would be able to twist his arm to take that on. I would think it'd be fantastic for use his background in that.
You kind of took the words out of my mouth, Doug. I was going to mention that if Sam is interested, but I thought that might be something that's in his wheelhouse a bit. And I know he's spent some time sort of, sussing out a little bit more of what EDIC, digging in a little bit deeper when we've had some of these conversations about some of their proposals. What are your thoughts about that, Sam?
I think I'd be willing to take it on. I think it usually meets during the workday. So I know it's difficult for some of you that are actually still professionals and trying to hold down job responsibilities. I'm also very much interested in the broadband initiative, which EDIC has weighed in on in conducting that study. So I'd be willing to pick that one up also.
That would be great. And Doug Jones, do we vote that?
I believe that is an appointment from the Board of Selectmen, so we do need to appoint that. It's not one that we take applications from. It is just someone that we appoint. And it's got to be one of us.
Okay. So can I take since we're
I
under
will move
reorganization?
As a specific step, I would move that we appoint Sam Patterson as our member of the EDIC.
Okay, I'll second that. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor by roll call. Jones?
Jones, aye.
Taylor?
Taylor, I.
Brown?
Brown, aye.
And English Braga, aye. Great, thank you, Sam.
You're welcome.
Okay. Now, Doug, tell us what your committees are.
So my committees have been the Agricultural Commission, the Falmouth Housing Authority, the Golf Advisory Committee, Library Trustees, Recreation Committee, and the Zoning Board of Appeals.
Okay. And what are your thoughts about those? And is there anybody, I don't have your list right in front of me, Nancy. I don't think those were any of the ones on your list that you were okay.
No.
What are your feelings about those, Doug? Are you willing to continue on?
I'm willing to continue with those committees if no one else is interested.
Okay.
That's fine.
All right. And so let me then go to you, Nancy. I don't know I apologize. For some reason, my computer is very slow, so it's not wanting to open up. So if you just let me know the ones that you thought you were interested in.
Sure. Affirmative action.
Mhm.
Disabilities Commission, Human Services Committee, Substance Abuse Commission, Veterans Council Committee.
Okay. So the first 1, 2, 3, 4 that you noted are ones that I was previously on, but I'll be candid. I work full time, and some of those meetings have been in the daytime, which it makes it hard. Even though, just to be clear, the liaison is the individual who is supposed to be the contact person for that committee, really develop a relationship. It doesn't necessarily mean we're attending all of their meetings, but it would, all of those committees are really meaningful to me, but I don't have, I think any one of us is a good connection for those committees. So if those are groups that you are interested in working with, I think that would be great. And then I can take over the remainder of what's left, which would have been some of Sue's. I think Sue had veterans
It did.
previously. Yep.
Yeah, she did.
The group that Nancy has mentioned, collect is a good grouping to have together.
Yes.
I
Have a
think
person do those.
I agree.
Yes. I agree. And there's a lot of definitely a lot of sort of opportunity for collaboration between some of those organizations. And so I think that would be great. Okay, so affirmative action, disability, human services, and what was the last one you said? Substance use?
Substance Abuse Commission and Veterans Council.
And Veterans Council. Okay, great. And then
Awesome.
the remainders I will take, which keep some of the ones that I've had before, and then I'll take on the other one. So great. Anything else about reorganization?
Well, just to check, when does the Cape Cod Water Protection Collaborative actually meet? Of course, it's going to be a Zoom meeting, I assume, for some time, but that might be a difficult one for you to handle, because I assume they meet somewhere in Barnstable, but I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but if Doug, were you saying that you were interested in that?
Well, I'm interested in water quality issues. I haven't researched yet about what would be involved in that. I talked to Sue about the other position. I didn't really think about that one really.
So well, I don't know when they meet, Sam. It's a great question. So let me, do Peter or Julian, do you know?
I don't know exactly when their meeting time is. I do know that I think Ray Jack has been the town's delegate to that, and I was just looking it up because I had a note on my phone. I think there are 2 years to go with his term. His appointment, I think it's a 3-year appointment actually.
And is he still serving in that capacity?
He's indicated since retirement that he's still willing to serve.
Excellent.
That's
As
nice.
long as it's the desire of the board.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yes.
I had to double check and make sure that was the right committee. I was just looking on my phone to confirm that, but that is one of the ones. Ray's also on the Upper Cape Regional Transfer Station
Right.
for another year. And,
Okay.
And also the coastal planning, coastal zone management, some sort of a task force, I believe.
I believe he's on that. There may be another, there may be, there's an Upper Cape Water Supply Collaborative as well that Ray has served on, and he'd be willing to continue. Again, they're all
Great.
in his wheelhouse, and I would certainly welcome it as town manager if the board's comfortable with that.
Definitely. I mean, I think
Great.
he's well suited for that, and certainly more qualified for to participate on that than I would be. I mean, that is definitely his area of expertise. So that would be great. And maybe at some point we can get him to join us to just kind of give us an update once, maybe in the fall, to see what's happening with some of, once some of these meetings actually start back up again, just to get a little bit of a sense of what's going on with that particular committee.
I'm sure he'd be happy to do so.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Sam. That's a good catch.
Good, thanks.
Anything else with recognition? Reorganization, excuse me.
Well, we still don't have anybody assigned to Board of Health, but they meet on the same night as us, so it makes it difficult.
Yes, and what I would say is, I think Board of Health is a little bit different because, we have been in such good contact with Scott and with Diane. I mean, it's no one's really going to be able to attend their meetings because of exactly what you pointed out, Doug, but there's just been excellent communication kind of across the board. And so I think that certainly they know to reach out to any one of us, but I think we've had excellent contact with both our health agent and the board. So I'm happy to, go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say, I think it would be good, even if maybe COVID-19 finally isn't the top health issue in town, to have Scott come in on a monthly basis, and he can even do it maybe through a Zoom, even when we're meeting face to face, and just give us an update on where the the Board of Health is in service of their activities and their issues.
Mhm.
Or Diane.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's be a good idea. All right,
Well,
but I'm
we-
happy to sort of officially, if we want to put a name next to it so that everything has it, I'm happy to do that. I mean, I've been in pretty regular contact with Scott, so that's fine. Okay,
Thank you.
great. Thank you. All right, and so we are on D, is that correct?
Yes.
Authorized application for community development block grant funding for micro enterprise loan program and related social services to benefit eligible small businesses and others in Falmouth. Mr. Suso, do you just want to set the stage for this? And then I know we have some participants who will be likely joining the conversation.
Certainly, Madam Chair, thank you. As the board saw from materials transmitted your way, we've been working with EDIC and others in exploration of potential funding availability through the Department of Housing and Community Development in the Commonwealth. This would be for community development block grant funding. This is a public hearing in furtherance of that. We're also asking the board to authorize an application for that funding, and that comes later. I presume, Madam Chair, did you want to talk about the hearing at this point, or the summary of action?
Yes, I think right now let's talk about, well, I want to just be efficient with time. So I think the fact is that this is the public hearing component of it, correct?
Yes, we scheduled that for 7:30.
Technically, it isn't until we declare the hearing.
Yes, so I think, why don't we, just to be a little bit efficient, let's do all of that, except let's do the whole piece at 7:30, and let's just finish our other two, our E and F, and that way we can move through the agenda a little bit more efficiently. So under E, we have authorized installation at end of Worcester Court for a Take a Book library for 2020 only to assess the outcome in collaboration with the Department of Public Works and Library Department. A really great idea, and seems even more so given that libraries aren't really open for folks to circulate reading material through right now. But Mr. Suso, do you just want to explain what this proposal is?
Certainly, we were contacted by Sandy Trainer, who's with representing one of our associations. I think Sandy might even be
He's here.
with us. Oh, here's Sandy now. And I'm sure she wants to make a few comments, but
Great.
the board may be familiar. The Take a Library, or Take a Book, I believe is the proper term. Take a Book library is in existence in a few other locations in the town of Falmouth. And we exchanged some communications with Sandy Trainer, as well as Linda Collins, our library director, regarding this request for a Take a Library installation at a particular location at the end of Worcester Court, where it was felt that would be appropriate to make that particular service available. I'll also note, and then I'll pass it on, that we also want to collaborate with Public Works to ensure that if the board is comfortable proceeding with this, that the installation occurs at a place where it will not interfere, but be complementary for Public Works in their maintenance work in that area.
Great. Thank you, Julian. Welcome, Ms.
Hi.
Trainer. You want to just sort of, I think people have seen these type of, installations elsewhere. But if you just want to let folks know sort of what your ideas about where it would be and who would maintain it, which was part of the conversation that I know went on.
Yes. My name is Sandy Trainer. I live on Jericho Path, and I retired here in 2006. But I just recently became a member of the board of the Falmouth Heights Mara Vista Neighborhood Association. And, when I was looking at the mission statement, one of the mission statements is to encourage activities that promote civic pride and helpful and peaceful enjoyment of our neighborhood. And so I was just thinking of doing this myself before I joined and having it on my property, but I proposed it in October to the board that in order to, my own personal opinion was the association doesn't have a real friendly community reputation, let me say. And I thought this would be a way for us to support something good in the community, and Worcester Court just seemed like the appropriate place. So the board said yes, they, that it was something that they would support us doing. But they advised me to go to Public Works and get permission. And we just seemed to think it was going to be an okay thing. And so I've been working, over these past couple months. I did send in, actually with the coronavirus, I went forward and just had it built by, George Engstrom did the construction, and another friend of mine, Tim Gallagher, did the stained glass, and we have it done. And then, I just called last Monday to say, we're having a board meeting. Can I get a status report? And I found out, geez, it was coming to the board. I didn't know anything about collaborating with the library or any of this, but I think it's an excellent idea to evaluate whether or not it's effective. I thought it was good. Whatever you were doing sounded excellent to me. I did send pictures of when I put in my request.
Yes.
I did send photos of the sites on Worcester Court. But since then, all those bushes were cut down. So I don't think it would look as good, down by the water as I had originally thought. But then looking at Worcester Court, I live right off of Worcester Court. Looking at Worcester Court, I thought, back further where there's benches and there's some bushes might be, a nice place to put it. But we're agreeable to anything. That was just my thoughts. But the fact that, whatever you want, it's okay with us.
Great. No, thank you. And the actual, little sort of library house is really beautiful. So really just the stained glass is beautiful. And so certainly it's, sort of a piece of art wherever it ends up. So I would say let me just ask, is there anyone on the board that has any comments or questions about this? We did receive emails at the library that they would, sort of take care of it and take a look at it, that folks on the, I think, was it from library trustees or from a different organization, Mr. Suso?
It was from our library director, Linda Collins, and Linda's with us. If you would ever make a comment.
Great. Welcome, Linda. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. We're very supportive of this. Any attempts to get books to people is a good thing. There are currently 6 other little libraries in town. Most of them are seasonal. There's one year round at the rec center. So we're happy to have this. I think it would be good to have it near the beach, especially in the summer months.
Perfect. Okay.
Oh, thank you, Linda.
Excellent. Any other comments from the board?
I have one.
Go ahead.
And the first thing that came to mind is a beautiful structure, but I'm curious of how it will be mounted and how resistant will it be to wind. I'm just a little bit concerned because we're down there in that velocity zone and we don't want to do something on town property that may become a projectile. So.
Oh, absolutely. No. Well, George Engstrom is a friend of mine here in town and has been in construction. He was the one that actually designed and built that. I didn't know if the Board of Public Works would put it up or what. We'll do whatever you want, but he certainly, in fact, he was not too thrilled about the artwork, because he wanted to put something up that was, you could see through, but it wouldn't be, you couldn't break the glass or anything. But, I was, again, Tim Gallagher is, a craftsman, and I really asked him if he would do it, and he did. And I think it needs to be pretty too. So, we can maybe move it back further, not down right by the shore.
I would say that I think, Public Works has, an excellent idea of what the installation probably needs to look like and where it would be best for, as Mr. Suso said, sort of working around, the maintenance that they do there. But it sounds like, the idea of moving it back is something that you you sort of thought about already because of the way the pruning has gone on, the landscaping has gone on. So Doug, I think that Public Works, and Mr. Suso, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Public Works would be installing it. Was that correct?
That's my understanding.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Would you need us to provide the material for the post or just bring you the library itself?
I would just say if you can communicate with our Public Works Director, Peter McConerty. Peter is he's not on as a panelist, but he's an attendee, so he's listening to this broadcast. So if you can interact with Peter via email and give him more information, I'm certainly we can work that out amicably.
Awesome. Oh, great. Super. And thanks, Linda, because, you're right. Books anywhere. I thought the beach, like we could have shelling books and kids' books. And, I was really excited about it. So great.
No, it's wonderful. Thank you. Great. Thank you very much.
Thanks for bringing it forward. That's a good idea.
Thank you.
Well, it's Falmouth Heights Neighborhood Association.
Okay.
You're putting a positive face, right? So
Yes.
that's great.
Yes.
While we have you, thank you very much, Ms. Trainer. We really appreciate it. Linda, while we have you, is there anything that you would, since you're here, anything that you want to update us on in regards to the goings on at the libraries?
That was my question.
Oh, well, today we started our curbside delivery. It was the first day, and we gave out over 100 books to people who had called and reserved them. So we're very happy. We were glad it was a sunny, bright day for this event. We also had the book bike out with free books, and we had some takeaway programs for adults and teens. Tomorrow and the next day, we have takeaway programs for children and families. So we're back working with the public directly or pseudo directly. We're not face to face, but we have people come and request their items, and then staff will go out and put them on a table, and then patrons are able to come forward and get the items. So we're really pleased. Over 100 items to 67 patrons. So that was a good first day.
That's great. So if people are looking for books, they can call and
they can reserve them online through the CLAMS catalog. They can call the library.
Great.
Or they can email us at info@falmouthpubliclibrary.org, and they will, I think we're hoping for a 24-hour turnaround for requested items.
And just because I know a certain 4-year-old will be interested, what is the children's book thing that's happening tomorrow?
It's just a takeaway program, and I'm not sure what it is, but you come to the library and it's something you can request and get to take home with you.
Great. At the main branch or all branches? Or
right now we're just doing this from the main branch.
Okay.
We have some exciting things going on at the East Falmouth branch. We've removed all the shelving. We've installed new carpeting in the collections room. New shelving is coming, and that should be ready to start with curbside delivery towards the end of June. And we'll do the same. The two branches will come up at the same time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions from the board for Linda?
I just want to say thank you so much, because the East Falmouth Library has really come a long way in the last few years, and it's really much appreciated by the neighborhood.
Thank you. It's really going to be beautiful when we can open it to people again, but we've taken good advantage of this downtime to do some much needed work in the collections room.
That's great. Thank you so much, Linda. We really appreciate it. Great. Thank you. Okay, now we have
Madam Chair, I think you need to vote. You take a vote on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So it says authorized, but we'll actually vote on it. Okay. So anyone want to make the motion?
I move we authorize the placement of the book. What's the actual name of it? I'm sorry.
Take a book. Okay.
Take a book.
Okay. Do we have a
by
second?
Public Works.
Patterson, second.
Okay. All those by roll call. English, Braga, aye. Patterson.
Patterson, aye.
Brown.
Brown, aye.
Taylor.
Taylor, aye.
Jones.
Jones, aye.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have vote to accept donation from Robert and Susan Catalano on behalf of David's Old Silver Swim, Inc. in the amount of $500. And this is to go to the beach department donation account for the Dare to Be Great award to a lifeguard. Really wonderful. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just making the motion to accept the donation with gratitude from the Catalanos.
Patterson, second.
Okay, great. And hopefully this will become something that is regular. And we definitely have lots of lifeguards that are certainly worthy of recognition like this. So really wonderful. All right, all in favor by roll call. English Braga, aye. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Brown?
Brown, aye.
Taylor?
Taylor, I.
Jones?
Jones, aye.
Okay. We're moving to our public hearing. And I don't see in my packet a public hearing notice. Does somebody have that?
I have it, Madam Chair.
Okay. Would you mind reading it? Because I don't have an actual notice.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
Town of Falmouth, notice of public hearing on Monday, June 1st, 2020 at 7:30 p.m. The Town of Falmouth Select Board will hold a public hearing. The purpose of this hearing is to discuss a proposed application to the Department of Housing and Economic Development for a microenterprise loan program and related social services utilizing community development block grant COVID-19 funding available to eligible communities to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it goes on to make provision for the fact that due to COVID-19, alternative public access is available in real time and online via Zoom virtual teleconference. Any person or organization participating in the live online session will be afforded an opportunity to be heard. Suggestions for other activities that respond to urgent local needs are welcome. Comments will be made via email to the Falmouth Select Board office by 3 p.m. on June 1st. Of course, that's today. The town encourages participation of residents and other interested parties. For further information or to submit comments, email townmanager@falmouthma.gov or telephone at area code 508-495-7320. And it also notes that real-time public comment can be addressed to the Select Board utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software, as has been noted. Instructions are given for accessing Zoom in the public hearing notice. And additionally, it says public comments may be sent in advance of the meeting to the Select Board at least 5 hours prior to the beginning of the meeting. Documents and audio or video files may also be submitted via email. Submitted email comments and documents will be made a part of the meeting record and may be read into the record, summarized, or displayed during the meeting at the discretion of the chair. Per order of Falmouth Select Board, publication date Friday, May 29th, 2020, Falmouth Enterprise. And I should note, Madam Chair, that we will continue to be accepting comments because we have a few days remaining before the application deadline, and we will certainly take that into account. And lastly, there's also a provision for a second public hearing, but the second hearing does not need to take place in advance of the application being forwarded, and that is our circumstance.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate that. So this is something that has sort of, like much of what's happening during this pandemic, really coming fast and furious, a lot of different things, really flowing through town hall and trying to fit things in to these deadlines that sometimes don't always line up neatly with meetings. So we're happy that EDIC brought this to our attention and that town staff was able to move quickly enough to get this properly noticed so that we could discuss it tonight. Mr. Suso, did you want to speak to sort of, again, set the stage on this issue? I know we have a bit in our packet, but just for the public, and then we can bring in the guests that are here to participate.
Certainly. Thank you, Madam Chair. I can read a few summary remarks from the notice of funding availability, which was received from the Commonwealth. And just to correct, it's actually the Department of Housing and Community Development, but obviously they're involved in economic development as well. This funding opportunity announced that there's $19.65 million in Massachusetts Community Development Block Grant funding to eligible municipalities to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Eligible municipalities are those that are non-entitlement, and the town of Falmouth happens to be a non-entitlement municipality. So Falmouth and its residents are eligible. All activities funded with CDBG, which is the acronym for Community Development Block Grant. CV is COVID. So CDBG CV funds must meet a CDBG national objective of primarily benefiting low and moderate income persons, as described in an action plan which the Commonwealth publishes. And they have standards for meeting those criteria for low and moderate income, which the town, if we were successful in applying, would be following. This includes the $19.65 million can be allocated for a variety of items, up to $10 million for rental and mortgage assistance, pardon me as I'm flipping the page, and up to $9.65 million to be allocated on a competitive basis for municipalities to deliver public social services and micro enterprise assistance related to COVID-19, which are the two primary areas which we have identified with our notice of intent. However, comments can be forthcoming on any of these items, including the ones that we have earmarked. Award distribution and limits. No single municipality may receive more than $400,000 for any combination of activities. Applicants may request up to 15% of an award for administration of the program and activities. That's permissive but not mandatory. Some eligible activities. First, a few comments, Madam Chair, on micro enterprise assistance. Municipalities working with local or regional partners may apply for CDBG CV funds to provide grant funding of up to $10,000 per business to qualifying micro enterprises adversely affected by COVID-19. The assistance can be used to facilitate economic development through the stabilization and expansion of micro enterprises, and there are specific guidelines and conditions for which businesses qualify for consideration there. That is part of the grant funding and part of the notification if we're fortunate enough to go forward. In a nutshell, a micro enterprise is a commercial enterprise of 5 or fewer employees, one or more of whom owns the enterprise. The micro enterprise assistance activity may qualify under the low and moderate income standard noted under a few separate criteria that have to be documented. Again, it refers to an action plan. Continuing on description, the micro enterprise required minimum eligibility criteria. For an entity to be a micro enterprise, it must meet the standards I've already mentioned for a number of employees. It must be a for-profit entity. It must have a physical establishment in the town, provide goods or services to multiple clients or customers, must be currently in operation and have been established prior to January 1 of 2019, be in good standing with the state and the city and the town, current on all taxes, and be able to document a loss of income equal to or greater than requested assistance due to COVID-19. And then there's some exclusions for businesses which are discouraged from applying: real estate rentals, sales businesses, and liquor stores, chain stores, weapons, firearms dealers, lobbyists, cannabis-related businesses, etc. The other element is public social service, and that can be addressed, as we've noted in our public hearing ad. That can include food assistance for food banks, food delivery and access programs such as Meals on Wheels, or other services. That certainly sounds familiar to us, that are unable to do so on their own. Some types of homelessness assistance can be considered, job training as well, and other social services that can be demonstrated to be addressing impacts of COVID-19. And with the assistance of Michael Galasso from EDIC, who I know is with us at this meeting, there was an outreach to our Falmouth Service Center, and Karen Delaney, I believe, is also with us for some comments, if that would be helpful. And we also have Susie Hauptman and Jill Bishop with us as observers because they'll be commenting on an item later in the agenda. But obviously, Susie and Jill are involved in social service related activities involved with COVID-19. So it's particularly fortuitous that they can be with us. I've already mentioned the requirement for 2 public hearings and we will be taking comments for at least 5 days from the date of our public hearing notice, which was last Friday. So we encourage residents to email, call, or write and get us their thoughts and suggestions for this exciting potential program. And that's my summary, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. I know there's a lot of details to it, so it's helpful to just get a sense of what the process looks like and what the purpose of it is. So let me turn now, let me ask Michael Galasso just to sort of weigh in with your thoughts and really your thoughts about how EDIC would be involved in this if we're able to move forward with the grant. And then we'll take some, what I would just ask is Peter Johnson-Staub, if you see any participants who want to make comments, I will ask at the end, just as a normal public hearing, if there are any individuals who wish to make public comment. I don't believe we've received any typed, emailed or written public comment on this, but if anybody else has, when we get to that part, please just let me know. Welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, members of the board, and congratulations to Sam and Nancy, too. So this actually filtered down to us through Frank Duffy, and it went to our executive director. We took a look at it, and knowing how busy the town is and the town manager's office, we forwarded on to the town manager saying that we'd be willing to partner with the town and help fill out the application and put it together. So that's what we've been working on with the management's office and with Karen too at the service center, put together the first part of the application, which is the sort of 2-page draft letter of intent. It sort of outlines what it is that we plan on doing. And I think Julian's done a great job explaining what the funds are available for. 10 million of it is earmarked for rental and mortgage assistance, but unfortunately that can't come directly to the town. That has to go to, in the particular case of the Cape, to HAC, the Housing Assistance Corporation. So hopefully they're going to be applying for some of that, because I know there's a great need in the town for that too. As far as the micro enterprise grant program, and I want to emphasize that it is a grant program that eligible businesses that have 5 or fewer employees, where one of the employees is the actual owner, would qualify for grants up to $10,000 that they can use to pay rent, utilities, and other costs that they may have caused by the impact of the virus pandemic. So, with our loan program that we're still working on, the small business loan program, we thought this would be a good complement to that, and to get some money out to some of the smaller businesses in town that could really use it. So our component of the program would be to help administer that part of the program, qualify the businesses, help underwrite the businesses, and make sure that they all qualify. And I think with some members of our board, myself included, have experience in income qualifying tenants and buyers and renters. So we know what that process is and the documentations that's needed to income qualify the owners. I think that would be a good help in doing that and helping select the businesses that might qualify for the grant program. And similar to what we discussed in our loan program, because there may be a greater need than the amount of funds that would be available, we would probably conduct a lottery to select the folks who would be entitled to the grant. So there's a lot of steps still for us to work out with the town manager's office and the other partners in the program. We think it'd be a great partnership between us and the town to move this forward and get some money into the town that we weren't expecting. So those are the comments that I have, and any questions that you may have available.
Great, thank you. Any questions from members of the board?
I have a few. I have a couple of comments and a couple of questions, and I think some of them may have been answered. But firstly, thank you to Mr. Galasso for looking into this and bringing it to our attention. And I'm really glad that Falmouth is eligible. So what I'm hearing is that the entity that would provide the administrative oversight for this grant would be the EDIC. Is that correct?
That hasn't been determined yet.
Great, thank you.
That's still under discussion. That has to be further articulated in our 4-page application. Certainly the EDIC would be one of the, what we call a partner, but I
Okay.
want to underscore that our planning department is also going to be significantly involved. Michaela Shoemaker, our economic development planner, has been involved to present, and I anticipate that town planner Tom Bott will be as well.
Okay, thank you very much. I think really looking at that entity in terms of the administrative piece and the oversight piece is important. And also how the money is distributed. That was another question of mine. I know there's criteria, and we need to look at that, and then how it goes out to the businesses. My other question was in terms of the 15% sort of charge to the grant for the oversight. I heard you say, Mr. Suso, I believe I heard you say that it up to 15%, but that we can look at that a little bit. 15% to me seems like a lot. And so that was another question of mine.
Sure, that's a great question. I can just tell you that I've been involved in CDBG programs. The administrative cost is discretionary on the part of the applicant, so it can be charged for whatever percentage. The ceiling is set by CDBG, in this case 15%, but it's totally discretionary, which is why I mentioned it's permitted but not required. And so it would be up to the town as to whether any administrative fees were assessed at all.
Okay, that's great. I think in doing this, making sure that the money gets out to the small businesses, but also to our community partners is really important. And then the second piece that I noticed was when I looked at Mr. Galasso's memorandum, he talked about the applicant, the town, and the partners. It listed just the service center and the EDIC, and that was a concern of mine. However, when I looked at your draft of a letter, Mr. Suso, you included the senior center, Falmouth Human Services, and I thought that was really important to make sure that those other town entities were included if we were to move forward on this.
Great, thank you. Any further comments from the board? I didn't see Karen in here. I don't know if she wanted to make any comments. Peter, if she would like to comment in any way, if we can bring her in. And Peter is telling me that we don't have any public comment at this point in time.
I don't believe Karen has joined us this evening.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure we offered her an opportunity to share any thoughts she had. I know she's obviously been included in the conversation. She's well aware of the process in terms of where it stands at present. Okay, so I don't see any further discussion from the board. Oh, go ahead, Sam.
I apologize. Karen is available. She's available to speak right now.
Okay.
Joe
Susie
Bishop
Hopkins
as well.
Yep. Okay, go ahead. So why don't we start with Karen and just get her thoughts on just her perspective on this program and the ways in which it may be helpful. Welcome. Can you hear us, Karen? Okay, I think she's saying she doesn't have a microphone and is having some issues. So maybe Peter, if she shares any thoughts, maybe you could share them with us if she wants to type her thoughts. Go ahead, Sam.
I heard Susie Hopman's name mentioned. If she's available, it'd be nice to hear her input.
Right, if we could bring Susie in if she's available. I know she was anticipating speaking a little bit later, but if she's available to speak on this issue. While we're bringing her in, Mr. Suso, did you have something else? I saw your hand up a little while ago.
Oh, just noting that in addition to Susie, Jill Bishop is with us.
Yes. Great.
And,
Susie, welcome. And Peter, if we just want to see if Jill Bishop is able to join us to weigh in if she would like. So I know we're going to hear from you a little bit later, Susie, but just wanted to get a sense of your thoughts about the potential for this particular program.
Okay, I'm just learning of it today and in this morning in an email, so I haven't really had a chance to see any of it in writing, but certainly I can attest to the fact that there is needs within the community. I think we all know that folks that are being impacted by the COVID crisis, folks that are food insecure, rent insecure, mortgage insecure, et cetera. So I think that there's certainly ways for the town to be able to utilize the funds. I think that there are a number of agencies that are involved in delivering the services. So I think that there probably needs to be some additional kind of discussions with other stakeholders and community members to see how it would basically how it would kind of operationalize. But certainly the need is present, and definitely an opportunity that I think could be beneficial to the town. So
great, thank you. Jill, welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Any thoughts? I know this is, and same for Susie, I know it's a little bit fresh. We just came onto our plate last week, and moving it to try and get it to have this public hearing. So I know folks have had different levels of exposure to the process thus far, but it's just helpful to hear your thoughts on what you know about it so far.
To be honest with you, tonight is the first I'm hearing about it, but I think, as Susie had indicated, I think it's a great brainstorming opportunity to look at all of the local partners and who we can support with this grant. So I'm looking actually forward to reading about it and having some input on the senior population component.
Perfect. So if I could just ask, and I think we just had a comment from Karen saying that she'd be happy to partner. And so what I would say is if we can just make sure that we include both Human Services and Senior Center Council on Aging in the conversation, because I think they, really touch upon some, levels of connection within the community, knowing where some of those needs are. So if we can make sure that in addition to the service center, that those two departments are added into the conversation, Mr. Suso, as we go forward.
Well, Madam Chair, they're listed as our program partners.
Right.
We have them on the form, and
right.
They'll be part of the discussion as this is assembled to go forward, assuming that the board authorizes us to do so.
Great, thank you. Any further comments or questions from the board? Yes, Nancy, go ahead.
Again, just a comment. I just want to make sure that in the development of any grant proposal that the Senior Center, Falmouth Human Services, the Falmouth Service Center, they really need to have input into this. And I know, perhaps timing was a little bit weird and clunky, but from my perspective, in order to make it successful, they need to not just be listed as partners, but really have some real input and conversations and collaboration around putting this forward.
Great, thank you. I agree. That was the point that I was making, that I think we just want to make sure it's fully integrated, that we are really having those discussions. Doug Jones.
I guess still to clarify, and I appreciate we haven't decided this yet, as to whether this is going to be done through the town or done by the EDIC.
Well, the town is the primary applicant. The town, it's only the town that's eligible to apply directly. The EDIC can serve as a partner, which we welcome.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Does this work in that social service agencies receive grant funding? The money funnels through the town and then to the social service agencies that are delivering either the financial assistance or service related projects?
I will just tell you, I don't know all the details of how exactly the funds get transmitted. This would just be working together to craft an application, and hopefully a successful one. And whatever the guidelines are that the feds give us are the ones that we live by.
Okay.
As was raised by Selectwoman Taylor earlier, our purpose is to get the maximum benefit out to the community, and that's really that's our vantage point for this whole package.
Okay, thank you. Happy to help.
Sorry.
No, just saying, Susie. happy to help.
We appreciate it. Michael, you had your hand up?
Yes, we'll need to put together a budget that we'll have to submit with the application and a cash flow projection, and that will help dictate how the funds will flow in a timely manner to each one of the agencies involved.
Okay, so that meeting with everybody that we've just talked about really does need to take place to kind of drill down on some of those details as to where the funds are best distributed and where those funds are most needed. So Julian can put that together so that we make sure that we, as Nancy is noting, we have that real collaboration so it's a meaningful understanding of what can best benefit the town. Doug Jones?
And I want to echo what Nancy Taylor said earlier about making sure that that 15% is not one that we're trying to get close to, that if there are some administrative costs, that we keep that 15% as low as possible to make sure that as high a percentage can actually go to help people, not a way that we add to our coffers.
Yep. Excellent point.
A lot of those administrative costs are already built into the budgets of the organizations. So I'm not sure why we would have to, supplement the salaries that are already and benefits that are already being paid.
Okay.
I can assure you that that's not being proposed.
Thank you.
I suspect that might be in there just for municipalities that have to hire somebody to write the grant.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Good
Great.
point.
Okay, now I'm going to ask Peter Johnson Staub one more time if we have any public comment.
No further comment other than what you received from Karen Delaney.
Great, thank you very much. Any further questions? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I move to close the hearing.
I'll second.
Great. All those in favor of closing the hearing, English Braga, aye. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Brown?
Brown, aye.
Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Jones?
Fine.
Okay. And seeing no further discussion, do I have a motion on the moving forward with the application?
Jones moves that we move forward with the application as presented.
Patterson, second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call, English Braga, aye. Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Jones?
Jones, aye.
Brown?
Brown, aye.
Patterson?
Patterson, aye. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Susie. Thank you,
And
Michael.
everyone.
Thank you, Jill.
Great, thanks everyone. Okay. So moving on to our, what has been kind of a standing item on our agenda and probably will be for the foreseeable future. We have a discussion or update on COVID-19 issues. If we want, since Susie, I don't know if you want to, since you're still with us, if you want to start out and then we can hear from Jill and hear from Scott, if that's all right.
No problem. I have a slide. I'm not sure if Peter or Tom is going to put that up. But really, what I just wanted to come in and report on, and thank you for the opportunity, is just to let everyone know how the Human Services Department has continued to maintain and operate at full staff, at full capacity, even though the building is closed to the public. So we've continued to, nope, that's Senior Services.
Hold on.
I'm sure it'll come up.
Definitely. It's a lot of moving pieces.
Oh my gosh, I hear you.
And we throw curveballs at our tech people, like, mixing up the order of folks.
I gotta say, Tom is a pro, though. I've had the opportunity
yes, he is.
to come over the past few weeks, and he's been really great.
He rolls with it. Thank you, yeah. Tom. That's perfect. Okay, there you go.
So yeah, we've continued to have our phones answered every day by staff, and either always by a live person. And for the most part, I can say that we have often hear from people that are calling a lot of thanks that that someone's picked up the phone and is just helping to hear what their concern is and try and refer them to the right places. We've also been maintaining a pretty robust list of COVID-19, like a resource guide, both local, regional, state, as well as web-based resources under all kinds of categories, and that goes out to key departments and key staff, and went in all the grocery bags with the service center, and it's posted to the website, etc. And we're updating the website regularly with relevant articles and announcements. In terms of the clinical services, the clinical social workers have maintained a very busy schedule doing telehealth counseling services. Over the month of April and May, there was 234 telehealth counseling services offered to residents, and the clinical staff also participated in some training on providing telehealth services. Our senior clinical social worker offers a weekly support group via Zoom with the seniors that had been meeting every other week, but really are really kind of appreciating the weekly contact. So that's been a great service, I think. And we're also, beginning to prepare for ongoing remote clinical services, counseling and group support. I don't imagine being able to have residents come in for the counseling services to our building the way that it's physically structured yet.
Right.
So we really want to make sure that we have the capability to keep doing it remotely. We've continued to do resident outreach for critical needs. Certain residents that maybe have not been able to get to food distributions or are in the process of some pretty critical services, whether it's housing related, benefits, they need documents faxed and mailed and things like that. So we're doing some of that essential incidental work, and also doing some mental health follow-ups and outreach with the police department. Mark Abbott is doing that. We've continued to do some outreach to some of the homeless folks that we are aware of, and reaching out to them to make sure that they are managing as well as they can. And we've also done some outreach to the local hotels that have folks that are there for extended stays, and making sure they're aware of the resources that are available to them. And lastly, we've continued to do quite a bit of phone consultation and collaboration meetings, both with residents and other town departments and community agencies. And that has gone up significantly compared to last year. We have a weekly community partner Zoom meeting with the service center, the senior center, the Falmouth Public Schools, and a member of the faith community to talk about some of particularly a lot of it's been about the food distribution, and just a chance to touch base and make sure that if there's families or residents that are in need that might be falling through the cracks, that one of us can find a way to reach out to them. I think that kind of covers it, but this last one is just really a message to the public that we really want the public to know that we are open, and not physically, but we're there, and to call us or to visit our website, and social workers are available to handle basic questions as well as offer mental health support during this time. And that's about it.
Thank you, Susie.
Happy to take questions. Happy to take questions too.
Perfect. That's what I was just going to say. If anyone has questions for Susie, I just want to say that I think it's really so important that you're doing what you're doing in terms of having somebody answer the phone. I mean, when folks finally make that choice to reach out for help, it's usually when they've gone through so many different levels of just, real stress. And to get, we've all been there where you're trying, whether it's in healthcare or something else, and you're trying to reach someone to support you or help you through a process, and you don't get an individual, you get a machine, you get prompts, and it's very disheartening. So I think it's really just, a wonderful service that you're making sure, despite everything that's going on, that people understand that they're going to actually continue to have that human contact. That's just so critical.
It's been a consistent response, especially for folks that are trying to navigate a lot of the web-based and phone-based services regarding benefits. Some folks that don't have technology available to them, or they're using flip phones, or we've just been on the phone with some folks just, as they navigate a website, or as they navigate and trying to do it in real time with them. Usually, and we're not always able to solve the issue, but at least for that moment, I feel as if they were able to have someone on the other end that just kind of supported them through a very challenging process.
Yeah, no, that's really important. Any questions for Susie? Yes, Nancy?
More of a comment than a question. Your services are critical at any time, but in this time of social isolation and the increase in some mental health issues nationally, I just want to thank you for your service, and your services are even more critical during this time. So thank you, Susie.
Here, here.
And go ahead.
Yep.
So I'm going to guess that your call volume must be up right now. Is that true?
My what?
The call volume?
No, that ironically, the number of calls have not increased to the point that I thought they would, but the amount of time that we spend on each consultation has gone up dramatically. I think that we track the information and referral calls that come in, and when we're sending them along to other agencies, and that is not as high as I would have thought. I'm anticipating a lot of needs as folks are going back to work and they're struggling with, childcare issues and, ongoing mental health issues. But I think what we call resident consultations, those phone calls that we get where we spend more time on the phone with someone, that has increased quite a bit. So there's been less information and referral to other places and more time spent on the phone with either a community partner or a resident.
But so far you were able to handle the volume and keep up with it?
So far we're able to handle the volume, yes. The staff has been really great. We've been doing a kind of a staggered remote work. Some of the staff are set up with their VPNs at home, and they're all able to do telehealth remotely, and some of that we're trying to build up that capacity to do it in the office as we phase in having more of us in the office and doing our distancing in the office. But the staff has been really remarkable, and it's not easy doing, as everyone is realizing during this time, these Zoom meetings and working with a screen all the time. But then when you're providing mental health support, on a screen with folks that, are, stressed out and dealing with other underlying mental health concerns, it's taxing for the staff too. So I just want to give a shout out to the social workers as well. They're doing really great work.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know one thing, and Julie and I have spoken about this, but just sort of going forward, looking at each department and thinking about what it is they're going to need to start when we start to sort of open things up again. Are there physical changes to the layout of spaces? Is there something different with, the way that protocol will be in terms of seeing individuals, delivering those services, and really, making that preparation for that transition. We don't know exactly when the timing is, but we know that things are not going to suddenly just go back to looking and operating the way that they were, before the middle of March. So I think it's, in the midst of everything else that all these department heads are doing, to make sure that you're really just communicating sort of those thoughts that you have about ways in which we can support the services that you're providing as we go forward. We've seen, I know at Town Hall, there are some changes that are being made to, again, really make it safer for staff as well as individuals who come in to, really access the services at Town Hall. And that's going to be true probably, in many departments that really have that public interface. So I know that'll be further discussion that Julian and town management is going to have with each department head. But we definitely want to make sure we're moving in that direction. Okay, any other questions for Susie? Great. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
I'm sure we'll hear from you again. Joe, welcome back again. So if you just want to give us an update on sort of what's happening. I know that you guys have been busy at work as well. So just a little bit about the services that you're providing, the needs you're seeing.
Absolutely. I have a couple of slides as well. And so I wanted the community to understand that my staff, we have remained staffed Monday through Friday, 8 to 4. And our goal is to continue to support the essential needs and connect people to the resources that are available to them. This COVID pandemic really counters what senior centers are about. We're usually about bringing people together and keeping people engaged, and here we're trying to keep this vulnerable population safe and keep people at home and keep people social distancing. So we're really trying to focus on what we can do, not what we can't. One thing we do recommend for people, and it's not just in a situation like this, it could be snowstorms, it could be hurricanes, but we do encourage seniors to connect with their family members, caregivers, or neighbors, and establish a plan with each other. There's time and time again, the police station or the senior center, we're working together because we've gotten a phone call that someone's concerned about somebody and we have no idea what's going on with them. So we want people to connect with their neighbors and have a plan in place so that we're not having to, search for people in certain situations. The next slide, please. So as we focus, we're focusing on the essential services. And so we've maintained our transportation service with our minibus. And that's for essential needs such as medical appointments, pharmacy, and grocery shopping. To keep the driver and the rider safe, we are only taking one rider at a time. We are requesting a mask is worn and the bus is cleaned between each ride. Something new that we weren't doing before is food delivery. And we have an amazing partnership with the service center. And as you can see to the pictures to the right, we are putting orders of food in from the service center to pick up and deliver to seniors that cannot drive themselves through the service center to go bag grocery line. And so we will pick up twice a week from the service center and deliver to each senior's home. If a senior would like to be put on the food delivery list, right now we have about 150 homes that we deliver to, which means we are delivering approximately 200 to 300 groceries each and every week to seniors. We also make sure as we're going out each day to distribute the food after we picked it up from the service center, phone calls are made to each of these seniors so that they're aware that we're coming. The food is left on the doorstep and we get the wave, so there's no contact with the people other than the visual. As for programming, what we are doing is our support groups right now, we are keeping them up through the Zoom process. We are also looking at virtual programming concepts for the short term. It could be a wellness program, an exercise program. So that's something you might see in the near future. The outreach services is something I'd like to emphasize here. We have an automated phone call system, the senior center database, and we have about 6,500 telephone numbers. So what we try to do is put out periodic phone calls. It could be a message from the health agent, it could be a message from the town manager's office, it could be the message from the senior center. So we try and get that message out periodically. We don't try and do it too much because we don't want people to get frustrated with robocalls. But that is a great way that we're able to reach out to a good amount of people in our community. The other is outreach informational wellness check-ins. We do phone calls to seniors, and what we were doing is a two-part. We had a partnership with the AmeriCorps group, and they were putting phone calls out to seniors that were not in our database. I worked with them on a script, and they were able to call the people and let them know what kind of services the senior center could offer. And I would check in with them each and every week. They're moved on now and aren't doing their calls, but I also have my staff doing hundreds of calls each day, again, doing the personal touch, reaching out to the seniors, making sure everybody's okay, and if there's any services that we can help them with. We've actually up to about 3,000 phone calls we've already been making, and we'll continue to make these calls every single day. What I've been pleased to hear is a lot of the seniors we talk to, they're doing okay. They were thrilled to get the phone call, and they've made connections with their caregivers or family members to help support them during this difficult time. The food distribution checklist. What we do is every Monday, there's another 150 calls. We go out to the seniors for check-in and also making sure that they are ready to receive the food delivery that week. And if there's anything else we could support them with. So there's a lot of personal contact happening with seniors via the telephone. We as well, in partnership with Human Services and Susie, we have a clinical social worker that supports both of us, and I have an outreach coordinator. So we are available during this difficult time. So if a senior is concerned or worried or feeling anxious or feeling isolated, we can connect with them and support them and continue a case management with them on a weekly basis. So we have a great deal of outreach going on. We also continue to connect with Susie and the faith community in the schools on a weekly basis. I'm also talking with directors across the Cape every week, and also the Mass Council on Aging Association every week, as we try and work out what is this going to look like? How are we going to start offering some programs? How are we going to continue these services? Right now, everything's over the phone. And what is this going to look like in the months to come? So we are there, we're answering the emails, we're answering the phone calls, and we're doing what we can to support the essential services. And we don't hesitate for anyone to give us a call at any time.
Thank you very much, Jill. That's great. And, just one of the many things that's been sad about all of this is, we have this phenomenal building that everyone really rallied for and worked so hard for over a decade. And it just went up without, knock on wood, with almost sort of no bumps in the road, and got open quickly, and everyone worked hard for that to happen. And right now we're not able to really utilize it and welcome the public in. So just another one of those things that is a bit heartbreaking, but certainly that the numbers of food distribution and other things that you're talking about, are really significant for folks.
Thank you. And to emphasize a couple of things is, fortunately, being in the new building with my staff, I'm able to keep them working. I'm able to keep them spaced out so we can still.
Yes.
That's important. I know people are anxious. When are you going to open? We're really trying to take into consideration, this is the most vulnerable population we're dealing with. And I want to make sure that they remain healthy and safe as we work this reopening process. So.
Yes. Yeah. Great point. But I hadn't thought about that. Yes. I can imagine it's much easier working in that building under these conditions than it would have been in the old senior center to keep apart and do all of that. So. Great, thank you. Any questions or comments for Jill? Okay, great. Thank you very much, Jill. And I know we'll be hearing, go ahead, Sam.
Well, this is not for Jill, but I'm thinking about another cohort within the town, and that's people like young restaurant workers. Maybe Susie's got some insight. I feel like, we kind of know how to reach out to some, like those who have been part of the senior center activities in the past. But what about that group of young people that have been put out of work and really have very little way of resources unless they got enough money out of the PPP?
Well, I'd say like most of the calls that we get, we haven't done any specific outreach to that group of individuals. Hopefully they have seen that we are here and available, but I can recall certain phone calls that I've gotten from folks that are either in the food industry or some other type of service industry, and usually what we end up doing is engaging in a conversation with them and making sure they're aware of all the different resources that we've compiled, informing them about SNAP benefits, unemployment benefits, etc. And then giving them a little bit of that kind of personal touch to engage with those. And then the first place that we usually refer to on something like that is also the service center, engaging in a conversation that for some folks that have never reached out to the service center for grocery delivery or financial assistance, it's really helpful to have a conversation with them to kind of break down that idea of, I haven't had to receive that kind of support before. And really just kind of normalizing it and letting them know that there's a lot of our neighbors that are reaching out to the service center for the very first time. And this is what it's there for. Our community is here to support you. And please take advantage of it during this time. And if you have any questions about how to access any of these things, to call us, and we'll just kind of walk through it with them. I always say that I don't know what the answer is right away, but I'm happy to walk alongside them and make some phone calls and work with them till they kind of figure out what it might be that they're that's available to them. But I do know that the the Chamber of Commerce is maintaining a lot of resources on their website, and I think they're doing a lot of work on their end. So I think some of those workers and some of those employers are probably directing a lot of their employees to the Chamber as well, because they're maintaining some resources on their website as well.
Thank you.
Great. And just a reminder that, excuse me, Veteran Services continues to do the work, the important work for veterans as well. And, really making sure that they're assisting in terms of, excuse me, accessing benefits. So, again, just a reminder to anybody who's listening that, just because these buildings aren't open to the public, as we've heard tonight, all of those critical services continue to be provided, and that support is there on all of these different levels. If that's something that people need, if they have questions, there's support and folks to help us all navigate some of those challenges that are new, as well as the challenges that have always been there. So thank you, Susie and Jill, and thank you to Don Lincoln.
Don Lincoln's actually here. Don Lincoln's actually in the audience if you want to have him come in also.
Yes, he is. Peter had mentioned it, and if Don would like to, we are happy to hear from him directly.
Don is certainly available for any questions, but he did not have any presentation prepared.
Okay. Yep. Do we have any questions for Don? Okay, great. Thank you all. I know we'll be getting updates, and as I noted before, as we're thinking about opening, please communicate to Julian, to this board, what your thoughts are, creative ways that we can really continue to reach the populations that are in need in the, with the challenges that we know are going to be with us for a while. So thank you. Scott, what have you got for us this week?
Well, I got good news. You guys want some good news, I hope, right?
Yes, we'll take it.
Well, in terms of community spread, it's really, really low. We got less than 10 active non-long-term care cases going on that are out of isolation. So it's as low. I mean, I went this weekend without getting an email showing from Maven that said there was a case. This is the first weekend where I didn't have to do that. It was a nice weekend where I got to text Julian on Saturday and Sunday with a goose egg number. And that's what we like to see. So, I mean, in that case, it's good. I mean, obviously, we still got to be diligent. I mean, there's no change in that. The long term's been able to hold their own. There hasn't been a big, activity over the last week or so. Let's knock on wood. So those trends continue. They continue statewide. If you look at the statewide numbers, is down. It's a little confusing if you went on it today because they added they backlogged a bunch of antibody tests and stuff. But the number, the same like-to-like number went down to about 300 and something today cases. And the trends for like hospitalization, the most important number to look at, deaths and hospitalizations, especially hospitalizations, that's still trending downward. So that's the good news. All the stuff is trending the way we were hoping it would trend. And now it's time to thread the needle. So now's the time to figure out how do you balance the openings and satisfy sort of that end, and with obviously keeping track and keeping the disease down. So that's where we're at now. And so the health department's essentially doing a lot of work with the sort of the reopening and just staying on top of the information. So that's been the big challenge. For today we had a conference call at, I want to say 12:30. It was what was going to be with rec camps. So the rec camp information comes out and about an hour before, and then we do our best to sort of decipher it. Then the calls start rolling in and then we go. So, so that's sort of it in a nutshell right now. So I saw Sam had a question.
Yeah, I was wondering whether.
Yep, Sam.
Whether we would see any new cases after the weekend. We had a lot of out-of-town guests that came into Falmouth, and I was worried about them bringing infections in. But there's no data a week later that indicates that there was any increase that we gather.
Correct. I mean, the incubation period, the mean incubation period is about 5.5 to 6.5. So that's generally when most of them fall in. Very rarely after about 11 or 12 days. So I don't know if we're probably somewhat in that. And again, it would only be Falmouth residents. I wouldn't know if somebody, there was an issue with some New Jersey residents or a mistake. But in terms of that, no, I haven't had what I call when I look at these, they come in, some of them make sense. Okay, that person happens to work at a healthcare facility. That person happens to, that makes sense. That person's there, or that makes sense. That's tied to this. The ones that just pop up, you think, well, maybe that's a community spread because we don't really have I haven't had one of those in over a week,
Great.
which is awesome.
Yeah, that's big. Any other questions for Scott? Yes, Doug.
I did hear that someone was driving by and saw that there was a Little League baseball team out practicing with some coaches. I was not on the impression that we had open fields for that kind of use yet. Is that correct?
I would say that's correct. I'm looking at it right now. I believe that's a phase 2. Yeah, that'd be a phase 2. So practice is usually phase 2, and I think at some point between phase 2 and phase 3, you might start having games. So that's where we're at with that. In terms of violations or things like that, normally what we do is we do a verbal. After that, we would do something more formal in writing. And the Board of Health gave me permission tonight to actually do fining, which I'm not really a fan of fining. I don't want to make things worse for people, but we do get calls. I do have things going on. I have some workout facilities that have had some calls, and I've had different calls from different places, and we follow up on each and every one. But yeah, that would be a phase 2, which would be as early as the 8th, which is next Monday. So.
Right. Any other questions for Scott? Anything else from your meeting tonight with the board that you want to share? Was there anything else?
Well, I basically said the same thing about COVID. It was, we had originally had a Board of Health order, which I did right before, and then I had them vote that sort of closed down the nail salons, hair salons. I had them, retract that vote so that they're on the, technically, if we still had that on there, and then when phase 2 comes and they can open, technically we'd still have that out there. So I took that, had the board voted to take that off.
Could you, Scott,
Yeah.
So did you say that you heard, I didn't get to watch the governor today, but did he talk about rec camps? Do we have more definitive?
Yeah, he gave us guidance. We got our guidance on that. And it's groups, I believe, of no more than 12. That would be 2 counselors and 10. And then that pod would sort of travel with them. So you're not bringing them all sort of like this, right? So you keep them outside as much as possible. And then that group of 12 would sort of stay together so that you don't have this, you don't go by activity where now 100 kids might be at that activity moving around. You sort of float those pods around it. That's sort of the guidance behind.
Okay. So that gives us about a month working with Joe Olenek to try to see if there's a way to craft something for the rec summer camp.
Yeah, we already started the email chain
Yep.
this afternoon. We'll Julie and Peter and I, Peter definitely, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, I know that's a really important resource, and the last time when I had spoken with Joe, we just didn't have any guidance yet, and I know he was really waiting on that. So that at least gives us, normally that rec camp doesn't start till that first week of July, so it does give some good lead time to try and think about restructuring it. So that's good.
Yeah. One of the things is it's supposed to be only town residents as well, like not out-of-state residents type of thing. That clause is in there, which just gets hard to track with kids coming to stay with their grandparents and things of that nature, and where's the child from. So there's that sort of whole thing going on. There's a lot to work out. Every one of these things, it's a nightmare to sort of work out.
Mm-hmm.
In restaurants,
yeah,
the restaurant guidance came last week, which is this. Mm-hmm. Which I was surprised. I thought, Julie and I think everybody was pretty much like, what's the percentage? You can have 25, 40%. It actually was just all about distance and nothing about a percentage, which, will be fine for some and hard for others, depending on how your restaurants can.
Right. And that first ability, if it happens on the 8th, is only outdoor.
Right. So it's outdoor. The main thing is outdoor parties of no more than 6. No bar service, and 6-foot distance between tables and any high foot traffic area. So that's the main thing. It's 3 pages long, but that's just the main.
The highlights. But I think as you point out, as you're right to point out, I think everyone was thinking about how you reconfigure your existing indoor space, and that's right now for this next phase off the table.
Well, it's for they're going to revisit that during phase 2. It's not an automatic going to phase 3 for indoor. So it's going to be based on the metrics and the data. So that could happen at any point within the 3 weeks. So it could happen the following week. And they sent it out a little early because it does going to take some restaurants some time to really figure it out. And the other thing I want to mention is that, as far as inspections, there was some questions about inspections that the board asked. It's going to be really hard if he gives the opening of the 8th to us to get to all seasonal restaurants. And I also don't want to restrict all the seasonal restaurants until they get inspected.
So we have a working relationship with all of them. What we're going to do is issue the permits so that they get open on the day that they're allowed to open. We'll get there within a few days, as opposed to us saying, well, wait, you can open on the 8th, but now we're going to start our inspection process and hold them up for, 3 or 4 days. So we have unless it's a brand new place, we'll take care of that. But some of these restaurants I've done over 50 times myself, right? So you have a relationship, you get them the permit, you get out there within a couple of weeks. And that's what our intent is on the seasonal restaurant.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Scott?
Just the one question, you will be sticking around for our next agenda item, right?
I got good news for that too. I can't wait.
Oh, good. You're full of good news tonight.
Just good news.
Hey, wait, and anybody who's listening, this is all subject to change. So you can't stop doing the mask and the separation thing, because this can really pop up quick. There's no doubt about it. So let's keep the train rolling.
Right. And I think it's fair to say that, the positive trend in the numbers probably has quite a bit to do with the fact that for the most part, people are taking, the social distancing, the masks very seriously. It's I find it's a bit of a surprise to see someone without a mask now. There's quite a bit of compliance when you're out in public with folks who are, when they're in grocery stores and in other places, really following those directions.
Mm-hmm.
Great. All right. So thank you to everyone for the updates, and we will move to our next issue, which is current status and information on nursing homes during the pandemic. So Doug Brown, do you want to just talk a little bit about the letter that we had received and the reason why you were hoping to have this on the agenda and get some further input from Scott?
Well, we received a letter from a resident named Heidi Ingram, who I know personally, and her mom is in a nursing home in the Falmouth area, and she's just been really concerned that she hasn't been able to get in there and see her and bring her little things like water or any little item that the love that you get from your kids is always helpful when you're in a place like that. So she feels like that she wishes she could have a chance to get in there. She wants to know when that can happen. And I believe Heidi's watching. I know she is. And I don't know if she's going to be wanting to comment, but she may. So we'll just make that opportunity for her if the IT would promote her if she so requests. And Scott, what is the good news?
Okay, so first off, the town doesn't regulate nursing homes. It's regulated by the Bureau of Healthcare Quality and Healthcare Safety and Quality. So on March 16th, the governor, and Elizabeth Kelly from that outfit basically said you can't, starting in March 16th. Couldn't have visitors. So I just wanted to double check it about 5 minutes before your meeting, and I get a June 1st letter basically allowing some visitation at long-term care facilities. So that's where the good news comes. And Julian, you wouldn't know this because I just pulled this right off before, because Julian and I had talked about this. So basically I came on, was going to say, well, that's the state and the state's not allowing it. But doing a little digging deeper today, the letter basically says that long-term care facilities may allow visits with residents to occur, provided that the physical distancing and protection requirements described in detail, which we don't need to get into, it needs to be basically a designated outdoor visitation space. So they're going to allow that starting on June 3rd. The state's going to allow it. And it's going to be allowed to be outside. And there's also going to be a section for compassionate care visitation, obviously, if someone's not doing well. So there are some provisions. It's hot off the press. And actually, if I hadn't had a chance to look at it, I would have told you the wrong information. But unfortunately, things change real quickly. So I happened, Doug, just to go right before the meeting, and there was a letter, it replaced that original March 16th letter, which we'll put on our website. I'll send it out to Peter and I will get it on the website. Seems like they're going to allow it. Now it's going to be up to each long-term care facility.
Right.
They're probably going to have individual, and this is me just talking out loud, some sort of individual policies. For example, if you've got active cases, you may not want to allow, if you have issues, they may go on and off, and you would do that on a normal season. For example, even prior to COVID, we had nursing homes that had some flu cases, and they shut the nursing home to visitors for the flu. So that sort of thing will still happen. If the facility is doing well with COVID, they'll have a policy. If they're not doing well COVID-wise, I'm assuming they probably not. So it's going to be up to the individual facility. the final decision, but the state is now allowing.
Great.
Well, that is really good news. It certainly is a lot of people concerned about it. The letter that she sent was signed by 250 or so people. So a lot of people really missed that chance.
Just they have to keep in mind that if the answer was no, the answer is there's nothing we can change. We do not like, the health department issues them a food permit. That's the only permit we issue. They're licensed by the state. I can't go in there and tell them what to do. And
Right.
neither could the selectmen. So that was my main thing to tell them, that we're up to what the state says. So the state said that, now it's going to be a nursing facility. So,
Right. And I think your last part that you said, Scott, is important for people to recognize that each of those individual facilities is still going to make decisions about what's safest for their residents. So, again, the state is removing this restriction, but each individual place is going to obviously assess what's going on and go from there. So
yeah.
I wouldn't anticipate, the doors are wide open on June 3rd, like they were before, the middle of March. So.
And Heidi, if you're out there, I'm just going to speak to you on this one. Like, so for example, if your facility has said, we're not going to do it, you still wouldn't call the health department and me have, or it's board of selectmen and have them demand it. It's just not the way it works. So you'd have to go through the division, the Bureau of Healthcare Safety and Quality, and try to get sort of that direction, because I would have no jurisdiction on the ability to allow it or disallow it. So just to say that if the place is, not allowing, it's not allowing. So it's.
And at the same time, if nursing homes, some are probably more responsive than others, then maybe people make considerations of whether or not there's a better place out there for them to go.
Yeah. Again, this is going to be outdoors only to start. So I don't know what's
Right.
going to happen this winter or fall, winter when it's a little. rough.
Yep. Right. Great. Thank you. And then I would just say, I know I've said this before, but, I hope people take advantage of, a lot of places are doing, FaceTime visits. And I know it's not the same as being in the same space, but, really, I know a lot of the facilities in this town specifically are trying to at least, offer some way for people to have that contact. So even if your relative there doesn't have a phone, a smartphone, or an iPad, I know Roy Magansett is doing that regularly. You can call and make an appointment. So, and they'll set that up. So again, I think people are trying to balance all those competing needs. So.
And even in this guidance, it says as much as possible, please still continue to use the time. So.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Anything else for Scott? Okay. Thank you very much, Scott.
Heidi, you can call the health department tomorrow if you get some specific questions. Just not all 250 of you, if you don't mind.
Yeah, if you want, and we can maybe and you said you'll try to get that out there onto the website at some point.
Yeah, that's not a problem. I just got a hard copy, just printed it out. So.
Perfect.
Well,
Thank you
that's
very much.
hopeful news. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. We now have discussion update on spring town meeting. And so, Mr. Suso, did you want to just sort of let, kind of outline what we're considering here?
Certainly. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Also, we have moderator David Vieira with us. I think there's David now. Welcome. And Scott McGann will stick with us in case there are questions for Scott.
Yes.
But in a nutshell, I'd transmitted to the board an alternative date, time, and venue proposal for Springtown meeting that we had discussed with moderator David Vieira. And I'll just read. You want me to read through that quickly, Madam Chair?
Just the highlights of it so that the public understands what's even being discussed, and then we can kind of go through details as we have the discussion.
Yeah, as everyone's aware, the town meeting was originally scheduled for April, but along with everything else due to COVID-19 has been postponed indefinitely, given the fact that the governor's emergency order is continuing. And had an informal discussion with moderator David Vieira about potentially scheduling a shortened outdoor venue town meeting in the month of June, because once we move into the month of July, we've moved into the next fiscal year, and if that does occur, it presents some unavoidably challenging issues financially for towns. It can be dealt with thanks to the legislature and the governor. However, it's helpful if one does not need to go there. And so we've had that discussion, and I'm pleased that Moderator Vieira is able to be with us to talk about that further. And he has asked if the board would take that under advisement and make a recommendation to him as well.
Yes, and I think specifically, obviously the setting of the town meeting, the details of the time and location, all of that is something that, our moderator has the authority to go forward and take care of. So really what we would be asking him tonight, if the board so chooses, would be to consider it. And ultimately, David would do whatever his due diligence is in terms of, and he can speak to that further, but really communicating with some of the town meeting members, some of the precinct leaders, and go from there. So we wouldn't be directing him to make it that date. We would be directing him to consider that. And that would be the vote that we would be taking tonight. Is that correct, David?
Yeah, when we had this conversation, my initial declaration of continuance of the town meeting was until the third Wednesday after the lifting of the state of emergency. And town administration had reached out with a request to try to host a small town meeting that had a handful of articles relative to the budget in June. And so before I move forward with that, I want to see, is the board comfortable calling the community together for town meeting at Falmouth High School at the, I think we're looking at June 22nd.
Yes, and so those further details that we discussed, as you're pointing out, David, would be, and Scott can speak to this, he was certainly part of that conversation. Scott has said many times that the risk of exposure with corona is sort of exponentially lowered when you're outside, out in sort of the fresh air without the confines of, building around you. And so some of the discussion was to have it at the high school. And again, as David's noting, a very truncated meeting. So really just looking at those finance issues, the budget, the override, something that's fairly limited, so that we are not asking for town meeting members to be there long. So again, the goal for tonight is for this board to discuss that, to ask any questions of Scott McGann and of David in terms of their thoughts about the logistics, about the safety, and then to go from there. There was, if Julie wants to speak to it, I do believe that Peter McConerty actually took a look and created a schematic as to how chairs could be positioned on the turf field. Is that correct, Julian?
That's correct. At the moderator's request, Peter McConerty was kind enough to look at a template for how all the town meeting members in a representative town meeting could be accommodated in a social distancing format on the synthetic turf field. And then, of course, we also looked at an indoor venue as a fallback. Would we have inclement weather for a short meeting as well? And Madam Chair, could I also note that Finance Director Jennifer Mullen is with us, as is Town Council, in the event that there'd be questions for them about warrant articles that we've discussed with the moderator as well.
Great, thank you. So the short of it is that the schematic essentially noted that we could fit the town meeting members on the field in compliance with the 6 feet apart requirement. There are still some logistics as it pertains to the use of, technology probably would not be possible. So we wouldn't be, we'd be going back to traditional paper forms for anything that normally would be projected. But obviously that's not insurmountable. We have to think about the logistics of how that, all of that is distributed. And again, the fallback venue would be, I don't know if you said this, Julian, but would be the field house. That was one of the things that was considered, given that it's fairly large and you could social distance. During our conversation, Scott McGann raised the issue of, the field house is different in the sense that there are some kind of more compact entry points and, the sort of public restroom situation would be challenging, although I don't think the restroom situation would be any less challenging if we were on the field, because it's the same situation. We have kind of limited restrooms for the number of participants, but hopefully the meeting would be, I think we were thinking about maybe 2 hours tops. Is that correct, David, that you had thought about?
Yeah, I'm not even sure it would be that long once the meeting itself started. We're looking at fixing the salaries of elected officials, the operating budget, the debt stabilization transfer, the wage settlement, and then the override, and that's it. And then we adjourn until a future time in 30-day increments under the new emergency law that we have passed. But I don't imagine, depending on how much debate the budget gets and the override, it taking much time. There'll be some questions. We'll go through the budget like we always do. There'll be no blanket vote. If we do this, it'll just be, I'll take by call of the chair these articles out of order. We'll get right into them one after another, and when we're completed, we'll adjourn for a 30-day period.
Okay. Let me just start with any thoughts. Scott, do you just want to share your thoughts about those two proposals, indoor and outdoor?
Personally, I like the outdoor. I mean, indoor scares me. It does a little bit. I mean, although the cases are low, everything's real low. I mean, but it's. I mean, if it has to be, it has to be. I mean, we'll do the best we can with sort of maybe having multiple entrances so we don't have congregating in those sort of closed-in spots and things like that. But if we can get it done outside, like I said, it's exponentially lower risk when you're outdoors. So indoors is definitely a little bit more problematic. I don't know if we can keep the airflow going and all that stuff like that, but we'll make the best work the best we can. So
thank you. I'm going to go with Doug Jones and then Nancy. Go ahead.
What flexibility do we have with postponing if the only reason we're not going to do it on Monday night is because of inclement weather? Can we postpone it to the Tuesday or Wednesday for that reason?
We could. Obviously, notification in the short time is an issue, but we could issue a continuance from the Monday night to another night, but you just got to make sure everybody knows about it.
Okay. Nancy?
Have any other outside areas been looked at? I guess I have concerns about using the synthetic turf stadium for a meeting.
Julian, can you speak to that?
I can advise that we thought about 2 or 3 alternative venues. I did speak with Superintendent Lori Durer and Facilities Manager Patrick Murphy, and they both agreed that the synthetic field could be made available on that date for that purpose. But we also looked at potentially the Cape Cod Fairgrounds, although we've not reached out to the Fairgrounds representatives about that. We also talked about the music clamshell at the Marine Park as well. But all things considered, especially with the what I was told is a fairly sophisticated sound system and with speakers at the synthetic high school field, that the feeling was that might best suit our purposes. And then when we talked about an indoor alternative venue with the field house right there, it was awfully convenient.
Okay. Any further questions or comments about this? I mean, I really want to make sure that Doug Brown, go ahead.
Just curious, if we're going to be outside, should we consider starting even a little bit earlier so we avoid the mosquitoes? That's another health issue.
We were talking about a 6 o'clock start rather than the 7.
Would that be the earliest practical time?
If you're going to do it during the week, you got to be cognizant that some people are still working, and more people will be working in the next 3 weeks. Hopefully, we'll continue to open the economy. So, we have to make sure that town meeting members that need to go to work during the day still have the ability to represent their precincts in the evening.
We'll just have to bring some bug spray. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I know we did talk about this because we specifically were sort of thinking about, this time last year we were really struggling with EEE, and we were canceling school events, because of that. And I think Scott's feeling was, well, I won't summarize, but go ahead, Scott. What's your thought about sort of
Well, generally the triple E needs a combination of a couple different mosquitoes, and they have to get into the birds and all that stuff. And generally that's later in the summer. I don't know what's going to happen in 3 weeks, but usually triple E is more of an August is when we start to see that pop in, late July, early August. I still don't want people to get bit by mosquitoes. Don't want them to get sunburn when it's 90 out, and I don't want them to get COVID. Pick your poison, right? So at some point, I don't know exactly which one. And, we got to kind of balance it and do the best we can. So I think, if it gets in by 6 out and 8, mosquitoes are not generally in June nearly as bad as they will be later on. And, it's a combination. You need to get a couple of different species to mix in with the birds and transfer it from one to the other. And that doesn't usually happen in late summer. So that would say
okay.
Hey, thanks.
Frank, could you, I know you've weighed in, could you just tell us if you see any problem, with this particular course of action in terms of just, taking these articles out of order and putting things off till later?
No, Megan, we've been discussing this for quite some time. There's been, recently as today, we've had some email exchanges with David, and I think David's proposal, it works. We've double checked with statutes and town meeting time, so I think he's okay and can go forward as planned.
Okay. Jen, did you want to add anything? I know you're here sort of to answer any questions, but is there anything specifically that you would like to add?
Not at this time, just, I want to just mention the importance of, passing a budget in June would be extremely helpful.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts from the board? Yes, Sam?
I just actually got a text from our superintendent Dewar that said there's no problem using the field on June 22nd, subject to the rain, of course, or the weather.
Right. Great, thank you. And so, David, just in terms, go ahead, Scott. Go ahead.
the other thing too, David, if you're hearing from other towns too that everybody's doing it inside or something like that, we're sort of the outlier. I'm not necessarily opposed to it. It's just my best guess about the outlier.
You actually have quite a big swath. You have some that have actually already conducted outdoor meetings in smaller communities. Others that are looking at potentially doing a short meeting at the traditional venues. And then you have I would say, vast majority of the town meetings that are just continuing and postponing and using the authority that the legislature gave the towns for the not less than 1/12. So they're kind of all over the place right now.
Okay. And so just in terms of process, David, if the board votes to ask you to consider that, what is your process going forward? So for town meeting members who are maybe listening tonight, I just want to make sure they understand what, sort of what the process will be in the coming weeks.
Well, so notification would have to go out reasonably quick, considering we also have new town meeting members who don't even have a copy of those unless they've looked it up online. So that gives us about a week window to put out a notification, because I think the new town meeting members should get the warrant at least 2 weeks in advance, as all the town meeting members did under the regular notification. So what I would look to do later this week, throughout the week, is to have some conversations with precinct captains and just get a sense and a feel from that level of town meeting member as to how they feel about it, and reach out to the members of the rules committee and see how they feel about it. And then make that decision if we can go forward by the end of this week, so that we can do a mailing notification where I would rescind my original declaration, would issue a new declaration, which would convene the town meeting on the 22nd at 6 o'clock. And then when we notify town meeting members, let them know we'll be doing Articles 7, 8, 12, 13, and 14. And then we'll adjourn in 30-day increments until it's safe for us to go back to Lawrence School and conduct a regular town meeting.
And does Greg think we can use electronic voting at the field, in the synthetic field?
We had some conversations of that, but handing things back and forth and all around, I'm not interested in doing that. Quite frankly, I wasn't interested in doing this. That's why I made my declaration for the third Wednesday after the governor to lift the state of order. I've been asked to consider this, and so that's why I want the board to vote to ask me to consider this. We'll go back to using tellers for this particular thing. I'll have people stand and be counted, but I'm not going to get into handing out devices and all of that. We're not doing that.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions for any of our guests here? Any other comments from the board? I mean, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jen.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that Michael Palmer is on vacation this week, and he usually sends out the notification. We have the envelopes ready for the new town meeting members. So once you discuss this with the rules committee and the precinct captains, if you want to let me know, I can get those postcards printed and mailed out. And if it happens next Monday, he'll be back next Monday, but I just wanted to let everybody know I can be the point of contact for that.
Okay. Great. I mean, I think, you know, I'll just say it for myself, you know, I come at it with, you know, I'm ambivalent because I know we canceled, you know, events townwide, although we allowed for the opportunity for modified plans to come back before the board. That's essentially what this is, a modified plan, significantly modified from what we would normally do. You know, I think it is helpful, obviously, although not 100% necessary. As Jen has noted, it will be very difficult if we don't pass the budget. It's not, you know, the end of the world, but it will create a lot of challenges going forward throughout the summer. So I think, you know, I do want to see us try to smooth that way and benefit the town and get some of those important initiatives that have already been voted on and are awaiting town meeting votes, if they're voted in the affirmative, to go forward. But I think, David, your process of reaching out to individuals, the point of having it on tonight and on the agenda so that it gets to be on the radar of town meeting members so that they can share their thoughts and their concerns. I really do, I really don't take lightly the idea of putting people in the position where they're, our town meeting members are very dedicated. And, you know, I don't relish the idea of putting them in a position where they are balancing maybe their health concerns along with their, their real loyalty and duty to town meeting. So I don't think there's an easy answer, but I think this process at least really gives an opportunity for weigh-in from town meeting members, and then ultimately, for you to make your decision, David, based on what you're hearing, and also from the Rules Committee. Anyone else? Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to emphasize that if the determination is made to allow us to go forward with the, very shortened half dozen or so warrant articles that are most critical, we'll take every necessary precaution working with Scott McGann and moderator David Vieira and all others to ensure that we have a safe and sanitary setting and that people's needs are accommodated. And I just wanted to take a moment to remind all that, of course, Town Clerk Michael Palmer held two elections, the state and the local election, a few weeks ago with some exceptional steps taken to protect not only the workers, but also all the voters who attended, and did that extremely well. And obviously, here a few weeks later, we have clear evidence that all those precautions for sanitizing that were taken have paid dividends, because as Scott McGann has already reported, we have not had any incidents, thankfully, of any, problems with ones being infected by the COVID-19 virus. So we can use the template and the sanitizing procedures that Michael Palmer used so effectively, and applying that to an outdoor venue to boot, to provide as much protection for town meeting members as we reasonably can. And I want to assure them of that if the determination is made to allow us to go forward with a greatly shortened meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Any other comments? Okay, Peter, do we have any public comment on this?
We do not have any public comment.
Okay, thank you. All right, so tonight what is on the agenda is whether or not we are going to vote, excuse me, vote this in order to ask the moderator to make this consideration. Ultimately, as we noted, that is in his jurisdiction. And I think, our timeline is fairly tight. So we didn't want to delay this any further if we're even going to have sort of the chance of doing it in June. So if I don't see any further comment, I would entertain a motion if anyone has one. Go ahead, Doug.
I would move that we request Moderator Vieira to consider the June 22nd date if it so proves to be feasible.
Patterson, second.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, vote by roll call. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Brown?
Brown, aye.
Taylor? Oh, you just got to unmute yourself.
Taylor, no.
Okay.
Jones?
Jones, aye.
Okay. English Braga, aye. And David, we will await your process and guidance as you kind of work through your, your communication. And please let us know what else you need from us as the week unfolds.
I'll start making the calls on my commute to Boston tomorrow.
Perfect. Too bad you probably won't have as much traffic, so you might not have quite as much time, but we appreciate it, and certainly we'll continue. We hope anybody who's listening, who's a town meeting member or just has concerns in general, obviously reaching out to Moderator Vieira or reaching out to anyone of the folks on the Board of Selectmen or town manager, and we will share whatever, if we happen to get those messages, we will share them with David. So that there really is community input, from town meeting members as well as other members of the community. So we really appreciate any communication we get. Thank you. Thank you, David. Anything else? David, is there anything else that you want to update us on that's happening that we should know about? Anything new and exciting?
Well, I'm sure you heard today, one of the things that that our chamber and the board here had conversations relative to reopening of restaurants. And the local licensing authority issues around the ABCC liquor licenses. The governor today issued an executive order that would allow you as the local licensing authority to change liquor licenses for the term up till November 1st and notify ABCC of the changes that you've made to the license so that if they saw a problem, they might, come down, but not to have to wait for the approval, which would take us all summer to get restaurants all over the Cape and all over Massachusetts. So there were some legal questions as to whether or not he could do it by executive order. So we have a bill that we moved to a committee last week to try to do it legislatively. He put the executive order out as well. And so that was signed today. So that is going to help us. I hope you all really start planning. I think it's on your agenda to talk a little bit about Main Street. But for businesses in general that serve alcohol with restaurants, for you to be able to make those changes locally.
Great. And what about, could you just update us? And I know it's always a complex issue around zoning. Do you have any sense if there's any movement on kind of loosening?
There's a piece of the executive order that addresses that as well.
Yeah.
So, maybe not right tonight, but we can do a briefing.
Great.
I don't know if Frank's had a chance to see the order that was issued today, but it does deal with the local regulatory issues that we should.
Perfect.
Be aware of.
Great. Thank you. And anytime, obviously I've said this to all of our representatives, we want to hear any updates, any thoughts you have. So anytime that you're able to join us, just let us know so that, that communication continues to be robust, which it has been.
And as soon as we have some information relative to budget, we're still trying to figure out what our consensus revenue figure will be, because that will change. We've had estimates change to between 4 and 6 million below the original agreed upon estimate. And so when we have some sense of general discretionary aid or Chapter 70, we'll let you know that as well.
Great. Thank you. Any other questions for David?
Doug had a question.
Yep. Doug Brown, go ahead. You're muted.
Not a question, but just before we close this conversation, I know we have a lot of seniors in our town meeting. And if anybody that's a town meeting member doesn't feel comfortable with this, please just shoot us off an email so we can get a sense of whether or not we're going to have trouble getting a quorum, because that would be also important to know.
Yeah, and I want to be clear that for anybody that doesn't feel comfortable, if we have the meeting, all they have to do is notify the clerk for an excused absence. I don't feel comfortable being there, and it'll be an excused absence for their record as well.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Great. Thank you, David. We appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to turn to, I know something that we have talked about a bit, and really a much anticipated conversation point, and relates to what David was just talking about, which is really reviewing, and there's a little bit more than 2 conceptual plans. There's been lots of different plans that have gone back and forth about trying to look at any relief we can give restaurants and merchants, but this is sort of particular to restaurants because of the most recent guideline from the governor, which is that if things go well, starting on June 8th, as we noted earlier, that the dining that would be allowed would only be outdoor seating. If you look at many of our restaurants in town, their ability for outdoor seating is fairly limited. Some have parking lot spaces, which if we have some flexibility, and if they own those parking lots, they may be able to do something in, if we get some of that flexibility we just talked about with David with zoning issues, that might be something that they can work through. Places like Main Street, where the space is fairly limited and most merchants don't own the parking that's connected to their business, is a little bit different and unique. And we've talked about this as a board. We've been in real collaboration with town departments. Mr. Suso, weeks ago, even though we didn't really know where the governor was going to go, sort of set the stage for bringing in departments that were really going to weigh in and give us some guidance and some insight onto what the process might look like. We've worked heavily with the Chamber of Commerce. We've communicated quite extensively with specific business owners on Main Street, both restaurant owners and retail shop owners. I want to preface this whole discussion with, just the comment that there is no perfect solution. Every business sort of has a different focus, a different interest, a different pressure point. But what we've talked about at length is whether or not there's any way that the town can support restaurants in particular that have these restrictions as we go forward, about some of the ways that they can have dining at their establishments if that opens back up next week. So we've had input both from Chief Dunn and Chief Small, DPW, really a lot of folks literally walking Main Street back and forth, measuring, thinking about ways that this is possible. So, I just want folks to understand that we come at this discussion tonight with, I don't know, probably 3 weeks worth of very intense review and looking at a lot of different options. So Julian, if you want to just, I know we have sort of more than 2 concepts that have been out there. This has been a bit of a moving target, but if you want to add to sort of the scope of the conversation.
Certainly, Madam Chair, thank you. On the agenda specifically, we initially, and this goes back a few weeks, as you noted, we initially had talked about a potential partial closure of Academy Lane and a portion of Library Lane, and had mapped that out and done a little bit of an internal analysis with key public safety staff, as you noted. Also working with the Michael Kasparian, our chamber president. Subsequently, there was a discussion as well of another alternative, which was suggested. It was a closure of the portion of the Main Street Road right-of-way on the south side across from the main library frontage. That's between Library Lane and Shore Street Extension. And then subsequently a suggestion that also the parking areas in front of the restaurants further to the west on Main Street would also be considered for closure. This to allow restaurants to potentially place tables in front of in the road right-of-way area in front of their restaurant establishments on Main Street. Of course, we recognize that some restaurants have the ability to have some space to the rear of their establishments. Others are not. Some also have the ability to have a modest, maybe one or two tables set up in front of their establishment if the sidewalk is wide enough, and others don't have that luxury. I should mention that more recently, although not listed specifically on the agenda, I had a discussion with Chiefs Dunn and Small, and also Public Works Director McConerty, about potentially any other alternative involving Main Street. One of the things that became clear in our discussion was that a full closure of Main Street to all public safety vehicles would not be acceptable. That at a minimum along Main Street, there would need to be an 18-foot wide lane, which was removed or not inhabited by any tables or any other structures at all, that would allow the fire department's ladder truck to move safely and securely in that area. We would not need permanent barriers there, but would need to outline it potentially with some type of tape or paint in that center. And then if there was a desire of the board to have a partial closure of the balance of Main Street, that could be on either side of that 18-foot wide center section, is where some tables, for instance, could be put in place if it were the board's pleasure to allow that, so that they could serve some, perhaps in 2 or 3 parking spaces, probably not a whole lot more there in front of any one restaurant, for table setups there. We have to keep in mind that the existing sidewalk has to be maintained as open and accessible for handicapped and non-ambulatory individuals. I believe the minimum is 48 inches, a 4-foot minimum on the sidewalk. And frankly, sometimes we're a bit challenged on that from some of our establishments that put both sandwich board signs and tables out there now. We have to occasionally gently tap them on the shoulder and ask if they would have one or the other, but putting both out there generally limits the walking area to less than 4 feet. So that's always a challenge on the sidewalk. But these are the kinds of issues that we have reviewed, and I know that we have Chief Small and Peter McConerty, as well as Michael Kasparian, with us. Unfortunately, Chief Dunn was called away to another matter and could not be with us this evening, but he'd be available via telephone if need be. So that's a little bit of a summary of where we are, and this is a matter that continues to evolve.
Thank you, Julian. You know, the idea is, as we heard from the governor, you know, that only initially the outdoor seating will be allowed, and the space between the tables is 6 feet. So when we had this suggestion about sort of maybe just utilizing some of those parking spots in front of businesses, you know, that quite frankly doesn't really offer that much relief, because if you have to be 6 feet apart, you know, from other tables, and you've got if you can picture that, you know, that the confines of 1 or 2 parking spots, maybe 3 if you know, depending on where your establishment is located, you know, there's not a lot of room there. So, you know, I know that we have kind of gone back and forth, and again, I know that there has been some concern from retail shop owners about the loss of that you know, that drive-by traffic. I just want to make sure people understand that whatever we're doing is temporary. We're trying to create some temporary supports for businesses as the governor's phases roll out. And so nothing here is permanent, and certainly, you know, we are open to taking a look at how we can improve it or respond and adjust to whatever the governor dictates as time goes on. So maybe if we can, if folks want to take a look at the 2 options that are available to us, do we have the
We do have some
visuals?
screen sharing, yes. Some screen sharing, Madam Chair, that we can.
Yes,
put up.
please.
Helpful. These first two, Madam Chair, are the initial proposals, which were a partial abandonment of Academy Lane and also a partial, pardon me, not abandonment, partial closure of Academy Lane and the Library Lane. And the concept there was that the board will recall there was a proposal to place a number of picnic tables and create a on the north side of Main Street, sort of a walkable pedestrian area. And by closing portions of Academy Lane and Library Lane, it would extend that so it would connect with the green space there, including the library lawn, in a semi-continuous swath from west to east, starting at Academy Lane and moving to Library Lawn. But that was the initial concept, and
I think for that, Mr. Suso, the idea was when we talked about this concept sort of, previously, that so the benefit would be fairly easy closure to make. You're not cutting off access to a lot of, you're not cutting that access off to shops. However, putting the picnic tables up, they're just allow people to kind of take their takeout from places to sit outside. It doesn't necessarily specifically give an individual establishment a designated table where they might be able to serve the meals as they would normally, sort of full sit-down meal with beverages, whatever else they might be selling. This would more be making public space for individuals to take their takeout too, correct?
that's correct. And in fact, yeah, as many of us have noted over the past couple nice weather days over the weekends, you'll see folks that are spreading out blankets or sitting at benches in some of the other areas in Peg Noonan Park to do just that very thing currently. So it would be an expansion of that same concept by placing picnic tables there that are not currently available.
Okay, so let's just take this particular proposal, and I'd like to hear folks' thoughts on this particular proposal, and then we can work through. I think it'll just be the most helpful to hear any concerns or thoughts about this. Just jump right in. Go right ahead.
So I kind of still in favor of putting the picnic tables out there, even if it's just, at your own discretion to use them. Maybe we put some bleach in a water bottle out there, but the restaurant people don't want to have to go across the street and take responsibility for cleaning those tables constantly. So I think as long as the public is aware that they either bring their own wipes or use some hand sanitizer or something. I just think it would be a kind of a nice atmosphere down there, and we're going to have trouble accommodating enough seats to make it really viable for the restaurant. So I think takeout is still going to be an important element in the restaurant business plan. But I think this just gives them another option for people that don't want to sit in a crowded area on the streetscape. Maybe they'd go over and use those picnic tables.
So I would, what I would say just personally is I think that, my feeling is if we're going to try and offer some support, I would like to see us sort of go a little bit more all in. And it doesn't mean we can't I love the idea of some picnic tables on the library lawn where there's shade, and invite exactly what you're talking about, Doug. I think you're right. Most of the business is still going to be takeout. So I don't see some of these options as mutually exclusive. I think we can sort of walk and chew gum at the same time. And I think we could put some tables, maybe they're on the library lawn, which is, again, a little bit more shady. I think if we kind of think about, some of the heat that we can get in June, or maybe it's going into July, to sit out on those roads, that's pretty intense. There's not a lot of shade that's there. But I think if we're going to consider closing roads, I really think, the restaurants really need a shot in the arm I think the retail stores do too. And I don't think that closing Main Street, whether it's all of it or parts of it, I don't think that that has to harm all retail shops. I think there's ways that we can offer some sort of incentives to make it a really beautiful pedestrian experience. And even if it's only a pedestrian experience for a month, and maybe the governor sort of, lifts whatever he lifts in a way that doesn't require it. But I think it would be something hopeful. I think it would be something that would draw folks, the folks that are comfortable. There's certainly going to be some people that are just not going to partake of this experience for very legitimate, health concerns. But for people who feel fairly comfortable, I just think our businesses, they are really on the cusp, some of them, of very significant financial, I don't want to be too dramatic, but I mean, some of them, I'm sure they've reached out to all of you, noting that this is really the last month before they have to make some significant decisions, either encumbering a lot of debt for their business, if they're even eligible, or, potentially making decisions about whether they reopen. I think this town worked so hard to get a Main Street that is so beautiful and is such a point of pride and draws people to our town, and is really a big part of why certainly we've stewarded funds in a very responsible way, but you have to have the funds there to steward. And I think being a town where people come and spend dollars, whether it's folks like us that live here and want to go out to dinner, or if it's visitors for the day or for the week or whatever it might be, our Main Street is definitely a big draw. And, my personal feeling is we could do something really bold and exciting. And if it only lasts a month, it just gets maybe that excitement for trying to eke something out of this very challenging summer. So I'll get off my soapbox, and anybody else who wants to make a comment, just chime in.
I guess what I would add is, I think June is a great time to try it. June is when we're maybe having only outdoor eating. It's not as busy a month typically, and we could do that as a dry run of having Main Street be one way. And so we would put the barriers in, as long as from midway of Main Street to the north end would give the 18 feet that the fire department is looking for.
So if we can have Mike, I saw your hand raised, but if we can have the chief address that specific issue so it doesn't get lost in the conversation. And then we'll go back, Michael, to you. Chief Small.
Sure. So, and just the minimum distance we would need for a fire lane generally for travel would be 16 feet, not 18, but 16. So we could get by with a little bit less than that. I just want to be sure though that are we talking about the one-way traffic with Jersey barriers, or are we still talking about just this library lane?
I was talking about the one-way traffic with Jersey barriers.
So when that first came across through our building, what we got from Mike looked like it was proposing two-way traffic with Jersey barriers, and two-way traffic would be really problematic for us, or utilizing the one-way travel, utilizing Jersey barriers, as long as it was one way with no associated parking, we could work with that. That would be doable.
That's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm suggesting.
Right. Oh, good enough. So the one-way traffic with no parking on the park, we would utilize, I presume we're talking about sort of the westbound travel lane, and that where the cars would normally park in front of the library. We could work with that. It gives us enough of a bubble around the trucks in the event that we had to stop, even if it was 3:00 in the morning, we could, with a bubble around the trucks, we could make that work with, as long as it was one-way traffic with no associated parking in front of the library, we can work with that.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Michael?
Yes, so thank you, Madam Chair. So, to your comments earlier, I don't think you're being overdramatic. I think the situation is dire. I really do. I think both our retail businesses as well as our restaurants are in incredibly difficult situation. The restaurants, We were just awaiting the word from the governor. Now we found out that it's going to be relegated to just outdoor seating. And that really complicates things. So we have to find as much room as possible for our restaurants to be able to make the most of this season. It was good news from State Rep Vieira that the ABCC is moving, forward in allowing the liquor to go on. And Chief Small was correct. When we first drew the plan, it was for two-way traffic there, but the one-way traffic would work as well. We were hoping to accommodate both our retail merchants as well as the restaurants. The retailers also are in a dire situation, many of them carrying tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars of inventory, of spring inventory that they haven't been able to move. So we want to also be respectful to their needs as well. And we were hoping that by blocking off this area in the diagram across from the library, it would really open up outdoor seating for the majority of the restaurants in that part of town. La Cucina, which is across from Peg Noonan Park, could possibly take advantage of the parking spaces in front of their building. And then moving up to the other side, I guess that would be the west side. I always get confused about north, south. The west side, if accommodations could be made to expand outdoor seating into at least the parking areas, or maybe a partial closure of the street from the Town Hall Square west up to Post Office Square, so that Town Hall Square would still be accessible. That would also allow seating as well. The initial concept we had for the picnic tables along Academy Lane and Library Lane was with the thought that restaurants would be opened with not only the ability to have outdoor seating, but indoor seating, but we're seeing that's not going to be the case. So along with Select Board member Doug Jones saying, this is a good time to try it, we really agree on that. Some restaurants like Anejo, that is kind of left out of the loop because that part of Main Street would be left open. Perhaps they could get a special permit or something to set up tables on Academy Lane. But I do think the situation calls for bold measures, for real leadership. And I think this is a great time to try it. Obviously, Chief Small has identified some challenges, and we want to make sure safety and security comes first. But it sounds to me like there's a plan in play here that could accommodate both the retail merchants as well as the restaurants and keep the safety factor in check. But I also agree we should, while we're at it, put the picnic tables out, which would only enhance the takeout business, which would be a great secondary goal for the restaurants in addition to expanding the outdoor seating.
Go ahead, just jump in. Doug Brown, did you have a comment?
Just going to mention that Peter Johnson-Staub did share with us some advice that the state had said that we will have to provide sanitary cleaning in between each visit. That's just a little bit of a problem with the picnic tables, but I hope we can work out some way to do it, because I just feel like it creates a nice atmosphere there. And I got a question about the one-way traffic. Which direction would it flow? From the Village Green toward south on Main Street?
Any thoughts about that?
My understanding is it would flow west from the headquarters fire station toward Town Common.
Okay.
Is that your understanding too, Chief Small?
Is that important from a safety standpoint? Because I was just thinking that a lot of the visitors to town come from the other end, and they would be making their trip through.
But if fire wanted to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Chief.
I mean, if you just look at the diagram, if we're just really focusing on that area that's in front of the library, the Jersey barriers would be up in front of the restaurants, and that would leave that, the westbound lane open. I don't know how you could. We've always looked at this as sort of it being that the traffic would flow, like Julian said, from the Shore Street direction down towards downtown, down towards in that direction. So that makes sense just based on that's where that red line that you see up in front of you now, that's in front of those 5 or 6 restaurants. The travel lane would be that one-way flow from as you're looking at your screen from right to left.
Yeah. Okay.
To answer Doug Brown's question, signage at Kathleen Lee Bates could make sure that incoming traffic knew, get on to Kathleen Lee Bates to get downtown. Don't get all the way down to Queens Byway.
Right. And I guess I was envisioning, sorry, Peter McConerty, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to, with there's multiple versions of these plans, and I think if we're gonna start talking about blocking off certain section of Main Street, if we're talking just about the area across from the library, are we talking a full closure, or are we talking this closure where there's multiple closures? Being able to work on these plans and put them together, the areas where Liam McGuire's is, where the burger bar is, where the Divine Pizza is, that would work out well for them. But you don't want to push traffic to the opposite side of the road. You want to if they're going eastbound, you want to keep them going eastbound. You don't want to put vehicles on the opposite side of the road.
Yeah.
It wouldn't work out well. But I think.
Thank you. That's a great point.
Right. I think we want to talk. Are we doing a full closure or partial closure? Because what's involved with this, as Chief Small had mentioned, is those Jersey barriers. Those Jersey barriers, just for that one section there alone, you're talking about 60 of those barriers. And they would have to come from down Cape and would have to order them. So just to bring them in, would have to see the availability to see how many we could available that we could get. And then they would have to be set. So this would not be a 1 week or a 2 week. Once you set these barriers, it's probably going to take a good portion of a week or a week, depending on the number of them, just to set them up. So it's a pretty good size operation to set it up. So if we just want to be clear that this is what we want to do, and it's going to be in operation for multiple weeks.
So go ahead.
Yeah. Let me ask you a question about delivery trucks, because obviously they need to get into the backs of these various establishments. Is there going to be at least the opportunity to put some kind of a chain across between an opening and the barrier so they can get down some of these side streets?
I believe our last meeting that we had talked is different. There's several options that we can have. The main roads, you want to put somewhat of a solid barrier. Some of the side streets, you could put more of a soft barrier. It would be like a hard barrier, soft barrier, maybe with chains that they could get through. But you want to make sure that it's not going to be able to move if it gets impacted by a vehicle.
So what about the concept of, I'm trying to be cognizant of both the labor and the costs that I'm sure are associated with having 60 or more Jersey barriers. I'm sure we're not getting them for free. So what about the idea of just closing a portion of Main Street, period, both ways? So we're not worried about shifting traffic or people not understanding where they're going. I mean, can we just address the concept of having a full pedestrian area for a while that actually gives us, both sides of the road with that middle section that would be left empty for what the chief is telling us is required, but that, retail shops and restaurants, we'd have some flexibility of more space. It's hard for me to conceptualize one side sort of just taking up, one side of the road. It just sounds like there's an awful lot with those Jersey barriers going into blocking off one whole section. That seems, do we know what the price point is, Peter, on those?
Yeah, those barriers, they're 10 feet long. They're about 30 inches high, and they're $400 a piece. So just on that section between Shore Street and Cahoon or Elm Arch Way, there was 60 barriers. It's about $25,000 for the barriers, and then we'd have to have them delivered in place.
Okay.
Well, our snow and ice budget can cover that, right?
Yeah.
Actually, we didn't do bad this past winter.
I think that would probably be a good investment to save some businesses.
Oh, I agree. I guess I'm just talking more logistics, and if there's a way to offer sort of more relief by, I guess I'm a little bit, I don't understand as much the value of I shouldn't say it that way. I guess I'm weighing the value of sort of going, all in versus keeping a lane open where people can't park. So then I guess you're driving to where? Town Hall or around the back to get to businesses. In other words, you're just you're not able to stop on Main Street in this scenario. You're just using Main Street as the cut through is essentially what is going on, correct?
May I ask Chief Small, is there a way that we could do that Chair Braga is suggesting that we would close it off from Shore Street to Walker, but you would still be able to get fire trucks going through, that it's pedestrian except for in place of emergency? Is there a way you could see we could do that?
Sure. So we actually walked. I don't want to speak for Chief Dunn, but like Julie said, he got called away. We actually walked a bit of this today, and really, from a practical standpoint, for us, we would talk about a hard closure, sort of a hard closure at Shore Street and a hard closure at Walker Street, or potentially a hard closure farther down Main Street. And so those two hard closures, they would just be hard closures, but there would be softer closures, other places where we could have a combination of Jersey barriers and something movable, where if we had to get out there for an emergency, we could. And what we had talked about today with the 16-foot access lane, the suggestion, it was my suggestion was that if we were to do a hard closure of Main Street, to just maintain a 16-foot emergency lane right down the middle of the road. So the restaurants on one side of the road could have some space, or even all the businesses completely. You could have part of one side of the road, the businesses on the other side could have the other part of the road. We would just need 16 feet right down the middle where there was nothing, no tables, no chairs, no structures. That could be pedestrian, that could be for emergency traffic if we needed. And there are workarounds whereby we could access, for instance, where you see, if you look at this diagram that's up here now, where you see Library Lane would be a combination of maybe a Jersey barrier and a chain across the road with like Pete had talked about, with PVC pipe on it for visuals, where if we had to get, we would amend our operations so that we wouldn't just be blown. We would avoid Main Street anyway. If we had to get down Main Street for an emergency, there would be ways that we could do so. But we would certainly need, for the areas where sort of people can build up speed, like at the Shore Street end and whatever on the west end, whatever you decide to do, whether it be Walker Street or even farther down as far as sort of near Eastman's by Post Office, that would be a hard Jersey barrier closure, and we would just be able to work around emergency access out. Like I said, we just would need that 16 feet of unobstructed pathway down the center of the road, that when there weren't, the rare occasion we would hope that we would even need to be out there, that could be a pedestrian lane. Again, that's a little bit beyond my purview, but there are ways that we could have sufficient emergency access if it was a hard closure on Main Street, whether it be a third of the Main Street, half of Main Street, or the whole thing.
And I can just thank you, Chief. I can say that I did speak with Chief Dunn because he wasn't going to be able. He had got called away to deal with some other issues tonight, and he said that it was okay for me to share this if it came up. That his preference is for something that's a bit more complete, like what Chief Small was just talking about. He said he views lane shifts as inherently problematic because you have people with wayfinding and things that haven't been updated, visitors who are trying to turn down ways they're not supposed to be turning, or who are trying to back up, on a one lane. He said he felt that lane shifts were kind of a recipe for some difficulties, and that from the view of the police department, sort of that bigger chunked closures, what the chief was just describing, would be preferable in his point of view for public safety.
So I have a couple questions, if I may. So the section between pretty much Library Lane and pretty much up to Town Hall Square is mostly retail. And the feedback we've gotten from the retail businesses is that they like to see some parking left on Main Street. The restaurants would like to use the parking in front of their establishments for outdoor seating. So to your point, Madam Chair, if it was possible, and Chief Small, if you can just kind of weigh in here as well, to close off maybe that section there from Shore Street Extension up to Library Lane, which would enable that whole row of restaurants there, and they maybe from Town Hall Square up to Post Office Lane, which could accommodate the restaurants from that point up, maybe enabling an AHO to use Academy Lane. You know, that would allow for some one-way traffic to go through, at least keep cars moving, but parking and spacing on both sides in the middle. Obviously, you couldn't park on the other side if the traffic is flowing that way, but you know, keeping cars moving in to enable, you know, some of the retailers to have that parking in front of their places. Is that something that would be feasible, do you think?
I can just say, as the chief is unmuting, that was specifically what Chief Dunn said he thought was problematic. You know, something where you go from one set of rules to another is what he said he envisioned as being a bit of a recipe for confusion, potential accidents, etc. So I'll just weigh in and just share. Again, he asked me, you know, he did approve me sharing that.
Sure.
Sorry, Chief Small.
Yeah, and Ed and I talked about this as well. And what I see, Mike, though, is that you would have this really narrow area where you'd have this sort of free flowing traffic and parking, but nowhere people would always have to go in and out from one particular place, whether that be whatever the access would be to that maintained two-way area. And I think that would be, you know, because you would need a hard whatever the areas you're trying to protect in front of the restaurants. On the Main Street side, the Main Street portion, that really needs to be a hard closure. Mm-hmm. That needs to be something so that somebody couldn't get up some speed and, you know, sort of, you know, you could have a significant problem that way. We have talked about what we talked about earlier today, like say Walker Street and areas like that, where you could stagger some Jersey barriers in an effort to sort of make people have to, you know, so that they couldn't, you couldn't get up a whole head of speed before you got out right onto Main Street, and that would be doable. But I wouldn't completely dismiss it. I would need to see, you know, more of an actual solid plan about what you're talking about. But I think that from, you know, both of those areas in front of the quarter deck from Town Hall Square West, and then have that middle area be free flowing, I think it would be very, very challenging. From a traffic standpoint, I'm not the traffic expert. From the fire department standpoint, we could probably make that work, but I don't think that I think that it's fraught with there's a lot of moving parts where people would have to do a lot of turning around and a lot of two-way traffic that would be penned in between two hard closures on either end of it. I think that would be a big challenge.
Thank you.
And then I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Just one other thing. So as far as that length also that we're talking about, so people would have access from, say, Cahoon Court, because I know that's come up a few times. It's like 8 to 12 homes on that street. So there'd be access for those folks to be able to get in and out. Obviously, if there was one-way traffic moving. So there would be people would have to just come in, head west and go in. And then when they came out, they'd have to head back out west. Chief, when you were talking about leaving that lane of travel in the middle, if it was to be one way, I'm just thinking, just to questions other people may have, would that be enough space to leave one-way traffic moving and parking on one side, the side that the traffic is going on as well?
So just to be clear, Mike, when I talk about a 16-foot emergency lane right down the middle of the road, that presumes hard closure.
Okay. So no traffic out there at all. That's pedestrians and tables. That presumes only, that's a hard closure with no vehicular traffic at all.
Okay. And if we were to do, a Jersey barriers down the center line type of option, then that's when we would but we would need the two lanes. We would need the travel lane and the areas where the parking spaces are. And for us, it's not so much necessarily of being able to have the trucks travel down that lane. It's a question of if there was an emergency incident or a fire, you need a bubble around the fire truck in order to be able to get the equipment off. So when the truck parks and there's going to be a fire at any particular occupancy there, you need to have enough access around the truck to be able to get the hose lines off, to get the ladder off, to get the two doors open. So you kind of need this bubble around the truck as well. So that's why we would need that. We would need the actual travel lane and where the cars would normally park in order to be able to operate.
So if we had that hard closure, that Cahoon Court becomes a challenge, does it not?
We talked about this briefly. Again, Mike, I'm not I don't want to speak to
I just don't think there's another way in and out of there. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head. Yeah.
Cahoon Court would be problematic. That would be something that that's a better question for Chief Dunn.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this is Julian. I think in talking with Ed, the feeling was that an arrangement could be made with the businesses in the rear parking areas to merge them and get potentially the folks out of Cahoon Court without needing to get to Main Street, but I don't have all those details in front of me.
Okay. Thank you, Julian. Any other thoughts or questions? Just chime in, folks.
I don't think you can neglect the delivery trucks that are required to provide the materials.
Julian, can you speak to that? Was there any conversation had about how deliveries would be able to kind of get to the rear of these buildings?
Well, yes,
or get to these buildings?
Yeah, just based on our observations, frequently, especially in the summertime, when it's busy already and there's traffic on the street, that they service the buildings. They park in Library Lane and service and cross Main Street with hand trucks. I think we may get some of that in Academy Lane as well, and along Walker Street, so that the feeling was that it's a little bit more work on the part of the delivery folks that are stocking the restaurants and retail shops, but that the observations that we had in our discussion this morning with police and fire is that is not unusual, and it would just have to be one more adaptation that would need to be made in order for the restaurants to be benefited.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Doug Jones?
You've convinced me to, I think the right thing to consider is a hard closure from Shore Street, either to Elmarch or to Walker Street, is where we're going to get our biggest bang for our buck, to help those restaurants and really create the pedestrian walkway we're talking about, and try that I know it's a hard thing to do for just a short period of time, but to try to do that for June and see how it goes.
Michael?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, except that I think that we also have to think about another plan for the restaurants on the other side of the town as well, and what could be done to expand their outdoor seating. And I mean from because at Walker Street, really pretty much it's all retail there, but then when you get to Anejo at Academy Lane, then you go up, you've got Anejo, you've got the Pickle Jar, you have the Quarter Deck, you have Bean and Cod, you have...
I'm aware of that. I think we have to draw the line someplace, and I see this is where we can do it. Otherwise, we're saying, what are we going to do on TT Highway? What are we going to do in Water Street? And we're saying this is one small area that we can try. I know that Anejo already has extensive outdoor seating. Estia has outdoor seating. Osteria does also. But the places we're really trying to help have no outdoor seating. And
I agree with you. And I think that I agree with you. I think that's great. I'm just thinking, I don't know if it's this conversation or another one, but possibly expanding into their parking spaces or whatever additional space they can use in front of their restaurants as well.
So, Michael, one of the things that, and I shared this, I think I shared this with Julian, I might have shared this with you as well, but Reverend Mebin from St. Barnabas contacted me a couple of weeks ago, and he said if there are closures of Main Street in any way, that St. Barnabas would welcome allowing people to use their parking lot as an extension of municipal parking, which I think opens up some conversation about, the use of some of the parking that may be attached right now to places like Estia or some of the outdoor space. Austria is a little bit limited, although they do have some outdoor seating. Again, maybe there's some conversations, as things unfold about some of the use of municipal parking in the back of, there's a little bit of area around quarter deck. I mean, I think some of the places are so specific that I think we'll have to problem solve, if possible, for some of those specific, places. And maybe be creative, and maybe with the fact that St. Barnabas will open up some parking that can give us some options to do something else. But I think if we're moving quickly, the suggestion that Doug is making, that sounds like it has some support, and it sounds like from what Peter's discussing, that fewer than all of those Jersey barriers would be necessary for what we're talking about. Does that sound true, Peter?
Yes, actually, from a public works perspective and the work of setting it up, it would be easier for us to do a full closure of a portion of the roadway.
Okay.
And just a little bit further, as Doug has mentioned, to Elm Arch Way, and I think it's also what Chief Dunn was also looking at. If they were going to block a portion of Main Street, you don't want people backing up. You don't want people turning around. You would want to have some kind of flow to maybe block it at Library Lane so they can use Library Lane, or block it at Post Office so they can use Post Office. Either that, or you're going to be sending all the trucks down Walker Street towards Surf Drive and back up Mill. It'll be a big loop. But if you could keep them in the downtown area by either keeping Library Lane open or Post Office open, you'd be able to have a flow of traffic.
Okay. Any other thoughts or input? Again, I think, we're going to tweak as we go.
Work to keep Library Lane open by doing a diagonal Jersey barrier from the Elm Arch bump out over to the library. So you could still actually drive from Library Lane to Main Street heading west.
I think something that what we could do is with Elm Arch is we could put an L shape, maybe something in there that comes down Library Lane and out to the bump out at Elm Arch.
Right. That's what I'm suggesting.
They'll be able to use that.
So to clarify, then you'd be able to come down Library Lane, go west on Main Street, and then either use Elm Arch Way to get to the backside of Walker Street and Town Hall Square and all. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, they'd be able to use Elm Arch Way. They'd be able to use Walker. Or if they were coming in from Palmer Ave, they'd be able to come up, and they typically pull down Library Lane and unload the produce of the liquor trucks and be able to just dolly it across the street. It would be more of a flow pattern in that area.
Okay.
So really, we're just talking about closing the section in front of the library for now, and leaving the rest open as is. Is that what we're saying?
That's what I think that's what Doug is suggesting. I have a question. Maybe Frank can answer this. So if I'm the pickle jar, the space on the sidewalk in front of Homespun Garden, in front of how does that? I read something today. I think it came from a chamber resource somewhere, talking about hoping that businesses sort of join together to help each other's causes, right? And so if you have a little window space in front of your place, that there's some collaboration, about that. I mean, those are generally that space right in front of those windows on the sidewalk. I mean, that's how far out, in other words, do most of the buildings own, is what I'm asking.
Just real quick before Frank, this is Peter. So over at Public Works, we actually have a Main Street street line survey for the property lines. And
okay,
for the most part, it's the face of the buildings. Some of the areas that it comes out 2 to 3 feet, but a good portion of Main Street is the face of building.
Okay, and the rest is owned by the town.
And that's the layout of the town. Some of the areas, they have 2 or 3 feet in front of their buildings, but
A majority of them, it's the face of building. But that's something, I mean, if we wanted to get finer into that, we actually have a good plan at Public Works to be able to look at that.
Okay, I'm just trying to think of some ways to expand a little bit for some of these other places that are positioned
Yep.
in a little bit of a tougher spot. Frank?
Megan, I have seen that plan from the Department of Public Works, and the building lines and the lot line do line up for the most part, except at Nahill where it's different, and that's why they have their own seating out front. But remember now, the sidewalk is public space, and so the pickle jar, for example, they don't control the space in front of it or the space to either side. So you could actually be a little generous in allowing a particular restaurant to go a few feet down the road or down the sidewalk either way.
That's what I was asking. If we had some, that's exactly, thank you, Frank. I was asking if we had some flexibility to sort of look at the restaurants that are in the section that wouldn't be closed and think about how we may or may not be able to assist them a little bit on the sidewalk. Keep bearing in mind the challenges we still have for ADA. Obviously, we have to comply with that, but okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
You have that flexibility. Yes, you do.
That's great.
Okay, thank you. Any other?
And I think that's what Michael's point was, is these other places, I think we can come up with unique solutions for each of the locations, whether the quarter deck can go into their back parking lot, whether Osteria and Estia can use Estia's parking lot for seating if the St. Barnabas is available, so they don't have to use that. I think those other places we can do and should try to do things to help them in the same way we're trying to use this one to help this other.
Yeah. Great, thank you. So Doug, can I consider that as a motion?
Yes, you may. Okay.
And do I have a second?
Yeah, I would second that.
Okay. Obviously, all of this is, we are hugely thankful to Public Works, to both of our chiefs, to town staff and to the chamber who've really tried to problem solve with this. So it is a temporary solution, and we're going to continue to work on it. And obviously, as information comes from the governor, hopefully on the 8th, we can actually start to move forward with this, and the numbers continue to be in a positive way. So unless there's further discussion, I have a motion and a second. All those in favor by roll call. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Julian.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to clarify, is the motion for the full closure from Shore Street Extension to Elm Arch or to Walker Street?
I believe it was from Shore Street.
Elm Arch.
Elm Arch. Okay, thank you.
Bring Library Lane open.
And then we may want to consider, I guess, maybe they'll just work it out, but there's a couple of restaurants, Patisserie and Divine, which are, Patisserie is more of a takeout anyway, but Divine Pizza, maybe the restaurants could all shift a little to the right to give them a little space, because they're not going to have anything in front of their place. But I guess that's something they can work out. I don't know if that needs to be in our motion.
I think that'll be something separate that we look at as we look at the issue of some of the sidewalk stuff that we just talked about.
Okay.
So I'll just take it discreetly. So for this is a particular lane closure, and then the usage of that area for restaurants, and we'll have to dig into the details of how that will be apportioned. But right now it's for the closure of those lanes or that section of the street.
Megan, if I may, before you vote.
Of course.
I just want to, as I look at this, I've got the diagram that Pete provided. I just want to be, I don't want to speak for Chief Dunn. I just want to be careful of what we're talking about. An L-shaped barricade at Library Lane, really to be effective, would have to be really hardened. We had initially, when we talked today, thought about using Library Lane would be an access point in the event of an emergency. So if that's a hardened area, that's a hardened area at Library Lane and a hardened area at Shore Street. That would be an access problem for us at 2 o'clock in the morning.
So hold on, let me ask you. So Chief, let me just ask you this. So if you're saying having Library Lane, okay, I understand what you're saying. So you're saying if Library Lane were less of a hard closure, that's how you get onto Main Street.
My recommendation as I look at this now, and if you want to just do a short section, my recommendation as far as to still allow us access out to the closed area
would be to push this closure down to Walker Street. A hard closure at Walker Street, but that still gives us soft access at Library Lane and soft access to the backside of Elm Arch Way if it were to become necessary. The problem is that, and again, I don't want to speak for Chief, but we both were really, that east-west, that Main Street area needs to be hard closure because that's where somebody could really get up ahead of steam, and potentially get through, hopefully accidentally, but get through those Jersey barriers. So we had looked at Library Lane, Elm Arch Way in the event of an emergency with a soft closure with a Jersey barrier and something movable, whether it be a chain or a post. So I think you would really need, from a public safety standpoint, it would be better to take this closure all the way down to Walker Street. Hard closure at Walker Street, hard closure at Shore Street still gives us Library Lane and Elm Arch as emergency access points.
So the only thing I was trying to figure out is for the delivery trucks, which I was trying to think would still come down Library Lane. I guess they have to back out to get out of there. And I'm sure they can handle backing out their trucks like that. But
So I have a question then, Chief. Mr. Jones's proposal leaves Library Lane open and you could take a right on Main Street. So it wouldn't be a closure of Library Lane.
No, it wouldn't.
No,
be,
but what?
It would be a hardened closure. It would have to be hardened all the way across Main Street at Library Lane, even if it was at an angle like Pete had talked about, an angled area from sort of that bump out. That would have to be full Jersey barrier.
Right.
So in other words, what the chief is saying is that you would have a whole section, that section of Main Street that would be inaccessible but for hard barriers. Whereas if you do what he says, there are soft entry points for emergency personnel.
We were looking at it sort of like the bike path. You look at it like the bike path where, there are areas where, you have to know where your access points are in the event that there's an emergency. We could work with dispatch, get that in the GIS and in the CAD. We could work that out. Not a big problem, but that would have to be. You couldn't have a Jersey barrier and a chain blocking off Main Street at Library Lane because the chain is easily defeatable.
Why would we want the chain anyway, though? I mean, we'd have Jersey barriers going across Main Street. Maybe they'd be at an angle, whatever would work.
Sure, but at 3 o'clock in the morning when we have to get down there, that's from Shore Street to Library Lane would be completely inaccessible to us because they're hardened on both ends.
Yeah.
Correct. You would have to go up to Catherine Lee Bates, I guess.
there's nowhere to go.
No way to get there.
Nowhere to go because it would be hard. It'd be
You need to get
sections.
to Thai cuisine. He couldn't get to Thai cuisine.
Except on foot.
Right.
Oh, I see what you mean.
So we look at those side feeder streets as being good emergency access points where Main Street could be hard. Main Street could be hard closure at each end, and then we could use the side feeder streets as emergency access in the event that it became necessary.
So if that was the case, just a question, if that was the case, if you would lock hard closure at Walker, any traffic coming down Main Street would be forced to take a right onto Walker Street.
That's the way it seems to look, Mike.
So the loop would be down Walker and then around. It'd be a much bigger loop to get around, which might be challenging for the municipal lot and everything. I see.
Michael, if we closed off at Library Lane, they'd have to take it right onto Elm Arch, and then where would they go? Under the first scenario, they'd be even worse scenario. They'd going down Elm Arch and really be stuck.
Right. No,
So
I was
this
just
way
thinking
they-
about, having that loop Catherine Lee Bates to Library Lane back to Main Street.
But this way they could take it right onto Walker and then take it right into the municipal lot immediately and get back onto the Main Street. Take it right at Ben and Bill's and then take it right past AAA taxi and get into the municipal lot and get
Down
back into
Chancery. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, they would still have access to the municipal lot. They'd have access to the back way to loop around to Town Hall Square to get back going in the other direction. I mean, none of it's going to be perfect, but it at least does leave some options available. Any other?
I'll amend my
Sorry.
motion to be closing it off from Walker Street to Shore Street.
Okay, do I have a second for that motion?
I don't really understand yet exactly how that gives relief to the chief with his emergency vehicles. Could you just tell me one more time how that improves
Yeah.
that?
Comes to the fire station, Catherine Lee Bates, down Library Lane, and takes a left or a right to any of those restaurants in between the two Jersey barriers.
Because he can go down Library Lane because it's going to be a soft. So in other words, it'll be two Jersey barriers with a chain. He can cut a chain and he can get through there to get to all of those buildings there versus if it's closed off.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Do you see what we mean?
Yeah. I get it.
Yeah. I know it's hard to conceptualize because number one, we've never really done this like this. And when you're thinking of all these different feeder streets. So does that make sense now, Doug?
Yes.
Okay. So Doug Jones has a new motion from Shore Street to Walker Street. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Nancy. Any further discussion?
And I guess this would include soft closures at Elm Arch, Cahoon, and Library Lane.
Correct.
Because you wouldn't want cars coming down there and getting onto Main Street from there.
So
Correct.
Cahoon's out of the picture though, because there's no back access into there. So Cahoon.
I guess you don't need to have it's going to be closed though.
It would be, yeah, I mean, it's going to be closed because there's no access there, so.
Well, there's houses on Kahuna, they're not. So
That's a problem, yeah.
Then that's going to be a problem. It's not going to work. People have to have access in and out of Cahoon Court.
Right.
You are talking about relatively few cars, infrequent. So if you had a break in your Jersey barriers, they could get through.
But it would be hard to know where you have your break for your Jersey barrier, right?
Also, you'd have people walking up and down that closed area with tables. It'd be pretty challenging.
And there is no Jersey barrier. That's it's closed. It's dead.
Right, it's closed, right.
Oh, the whole street is closed.
The whole street's closed, so there's no, it's just
right.
closed.
So it may be that we have to provide private parking for them in Peg Noonan Park. And, you know, again, it's not going to work for everybody, but to have reserved parking in Peg Noonan Park for those houses that have to walk to those houses.
But if there's private property, I haven't been back there for a little while. I lived there when I was really little, but I don't remember. I didn't grab a car then. But is it only rentals that have parking spots? How many parking spots? Do you know off the top of your head, Michael? Have you been back there recently?
I don't. I haven't been back there, but it was brought to my attention that there are homes back there, and you know, people going in and out of there. I can't even, to be honest with you, I can't visualize if the street itself might, you know, whether there's a back way or if there's access to those back parking lots, if there's a way to get cars in and out without.
Let me just, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to see if we can just ask, I'm sure Chief Dunn probably knows.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure he's driven that many times. So.
It's just a dead end. There's a couple of houses down there.
Yeah.
The only access is in and out off of Main Street. That's all there is. There's a couple of houses. There you go.
Here we go. Cahoon Court. All right, so this. Yeah, it's a dead end. There's no side street, looks like.
No, the only way you could do it is if you had if there was if you created a cut through, and you'd have to do that through the back of a business, like behind Burger Bar, through the other lot.
Through the back of the business parking.
Correct. So you'd have to have an agreement for that.
Well, you know, these are the businesses that are being benefited, so we would ask them to work with us.
And I apologize real quick. Cahoon Court does. I'm sorry, I had Cahoon Court and then the alleyway that's next to Country Fair confused. Cahoon Court comes out in the parking lot of the hotel.
Of Shoreway Acres.
Yeah, Shoreway Acres.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yep.
Yeah. No, it's not convenient, but there is.
There is.
There is
relatively easy access in through the back of Cahoon Court. It goes through Shoreway Acres.
So we'd have to speak to Shoreway Acres to see if they would be amenable to that.
But given that Shoreway Acres was amenable, you'll correct me if they were being very generous about trying to accommodate some other businesses.
They were. Actually, Dory and Greg Ketterer were very generous in supporting the restaurants by saying that if they had to, they would accommodate tables. So I don't want to speak on their behalf,
No.
but I think it's definitely worth asking them if they would not
Yeah.
mind with that traffic going through there. And, you know, I'm confident they would be willing to provide whatever relief.
I think
wanna speak
obviously,
for them, but-
yeah, I think, and we wouldn't put you in that position. I think tonight our job is to take a vote.
Yes.
And then obviously there are many pieces and steps that go into then addressing it. But taking the vote tonight allows that process to play out, to have those communications and go from there.
Absolutely. I think we can make it work.
Okay.
So it's parking on the lane next to Country Fair that doesn't have any access out.
That's correct. That's dead ended, right? But there's that alleyway that runs between Country Fair and whatever's next door there. And I
See,
think,
optical.
So we might need to allow like parking on Library Lane or something.
I think
Short
we
Street
can.
extension.
Sure, that's what I meant to say, excuse me.
Yep. Frank, did you want to say something?
no,
Okay. And one thing, just so people are aware, I already talked about this with the chief and Chief Dunn in one of the conversations. We know and we understand the handicap parking that we take away in this process will need to be replaced. So there'll be some adjustment of that. We cannot just take away these handicap parking spots. We will create and deal with those issues as we go forward. But to make sure that we keep in mind that we are not going to sort of impact that overall. There are ways to address it. Okay.
Could we use part of Library Lane will kind of be a dead end now. And so maybe there's a place that we can put some parking on Library Lane since it's not going to be, there's no place to drive to.
Right. As long as we don't impact what Chief Small needs.
Right.
We can take a look at that. Okay, so knowing that we have lots of details that we still have to work through.
Scott has a question.
So,
Yeah, the only thing about Library Lane, if you're going to utilize that for truck delivery, you'd want to limit the parking a little. So I want to bring that up.
Thank you. Okay, so we have Doug's motion, we have Doug's second. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor by roll call of a closure from Shore Street to Walker Street with the soft closures as necessary and parking adjustments as necessary. Patterson.
Patterson, aye.
Brown.
Brown, aye.
Jones.
Jones, aye.
Taylor.
Taylor, I.
English Braga, aye. Great, thank you. We have a lot of moving parts, but we're just trying to get some relief here to all of these folks who are just such important members of our community. So we'll continue to work on those details. And thank you, Chief. We really appreciate it. I know you've been walking that section and thinking about how it can work. And same for you, Peter, and to Chief Dunn, who's not with us. So thank you. And thanks, Julian, for spearheading that. Okay, next we have, and thank you, Scott McGann, for sticking around. We appreciate it. That was a long one. All right, we have minutes of meetings. Public session, April 27th, 2020, and May 18th, 2020.
Yep, Madam Chair, on page 7 of the first one, April 27th, we have a conflict. If you go down to where you see the first bolded area, it says Ms. Moran, motion to have this project move forward. Second, Mr. Brown, roll call vote. Ms. Moran, aye. Mr. Patterson, aye, cannot be there and also be named on the next line. So take out Patterson, aye. I think I voted against that.
Okay.
And with that, I would move that we approve these minutes as edited and released to the public.
Jones, second.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call, English Braga, aye. Patterson.
Patterson, aye.
Brown.
Brown, aye.
I don't know that Nancy can vote on it because she
I
wasn't
think
there.
I abstain on both.
Jones, aye.
Perfect, thank you. And Jones. Great,
Jones,
okay.
aye.
And then on the May
Gotcha, thank you. And for,
May
yep,
18th,
go ahead.
yeah, on page 7 again, under the 6 individual selectmen's reports, under Mr. Patterson says, received a memorandum from the Community Preservation Coordinator, Carol, should be Sutherland, Sutherland, Sutherland. There's just a last name, and Carol is usually, she spells it with an E at the end of the L. So
Great.
just a name correction. And with that, I would move approval as edited and released to public access.
One second.
Okay, all those by roll call. English Braga, aye. Patterson,
Patterson, aye.
Jones,
Jones, aye.
Brown,
Brown, aye.
and Taylor.
Abstain.
Thank you. Okay. We have executive minutes.
I move to approve, but not release to public access.
Great. Do I have a second?
Second,
Okay, all those in favor by roll call. English Braga, aye. Jones,
Jones, aye.
Brown,
Brown, aye.
Patterson,
Patterson, aye.
Taylor.
Abstain.
Okay. And, sorry, my agenda here. We on to individual selectmen's reports. Just jump in, folks. If anyone has anything.
Nothing,
Let me
nothing.
just give you an update. Actually, Julian and I both, through Zoom conference, sat in on a meeting of the Friends of Nopska Light Board, also their annual meeting. And I just wanted to give a little progress report on where they are. The Keeper's House, as well as the Lighthouse, the renovation is essentially done, except for some almost punch list type items on the inside that the contractor will be working to complete over the next month, really over the month of June. And Julian, please feel free to come in here at any point. The site work is incomplete. They'll be able to kind of make it serviceable, but really what it means is the entire parcel will not be open to the public for some time. The situation is that they just do not have enough funds raised to start in and turn the Keeper's House into a museum. Because of the site work issues, they're not going to have access to the tower unless something can get worked out. Of course, fundraising is key now at this point, and in order for them to turn that Keeper's House and Lighthouse into an educational facility with open public access and a museum in the Keeper's House. So that's work to be done, and there aren't funds available right now. So I'll basically do a solicitation on behalf of this beautiful building, restored building, and an enormous amount of work has gone into correcting things, the rotted joists in the walls and what have you. So structurally, the Keeper's House, as well as the Lighthouse, have been restored. So we have everything stabilized, and now the effort is going to focus basically on turning the spaces into a usable educational facility, which includes a museum as part of this effort. But that's going to wait for available funds. To date, most of the funds have been provided through CPC and through some grants from the Mass Cultural Council, and so it's, of course, plenty of private funds have been contributed, but the public funds, for the most part, have paid for the work that's been done, the majority of them up to this point. So if anybody knows of a donor that is interested in contributing to a legacy for this town, I know that it was reported at this meeting that Martha's Vineyard Savings Bank did a survey of its customers of the most significant historical spots in this part of the Cape, and Nopska was at the top of the list. So it is definitely a favorite landmark for almost all of us, I would say. So that was that pretty good. I guess I'll mention that there was a Zoom meeting this morning where aides for Julian Sear, basically, where you heard this earlier, solicited input from the various counselors and selectmen that participated on the whole issue of how can we open up businesses through more flexible zoning and also liquor license permits and such. And they're looking for feedback, and they're working on some of these task forces to figure out a way to open up opportunities for businesses so they can begin to try to eke through this summer. That's it.
Thank you. And did you make an announcement at the beginning? I may have missed it, about the money that was awarded to NOPSCA. Maybe Julian, I think the $200,000 that was awarded to NOPSCA for some of the work that they're doing there.
Yes, very timely and very much appreciated. So it's some state dollars, as I recall.
Yeah, 200,000.
Yep.
From Mass Cultural Council.
Yes. So pretty impressive that again, that takes a lot of legwork to do those to do those applications and to really make sure it's a strong application in order to get funds of that magnitude. So huge kudos to the folks who have been putting just a lot of work into making sure that we get some funds to help with this beautiful landmark.
I should mention one other important feature that or a milestone. The Coast Guard actually did hire a contractor. They did come in and fully remediate the contamination that is built up over 130 years. 130 years. And so that has been remediated. So that's no longer an issue. I know that historically what happened is that the Coast Guard had turned over a lighthouse to a private, well, not-for-profit organization, and they had people living in the house, and there were children, and a lawsuit ensued that they actually had been ingested lead paint, and the Coast Guard basically stopped turning over these lighthouses, these historic lighthouses, to private organizations for the purpose of housing. And so that's the reason why nobody was allowed to live in the NOPSCA house, because of the concern about potential contaminants that might poison somebody. So that's been resolved. And so it's possible now for the Coast Guard to turn the property over to the town. Or I've heard at least some people suggesting that it ought to be to a private organization like the Friends of NOPSCA Light. So at least that's a nice milestone. We know that it's possible for that property to be turned over for sort of long-term permanent ownership by another entity.
Good to know.
Great, thank you. Doug Brown.
Nothing big to report. I attended that meeting as well, and it was interesting, and a lot of people from all over the Cape shared their different perspectives and different concerns, and we're not all thinking exactly the same way. Some are more cautious than others, and I think one lady that made a really good point about the fact that we got to maintain a safe environment, and Nancy seconded her comments that we can't just blow it wide open. We got to maintain safety and make sure that we present ourselves as a safe community because we're maintaining it that way. I thought that was an important, good point.
And the other point.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Nancy. Yeah, no, go right ahead.
The other point that we heard this morning too is not separating the health from the economy. They're not mutually exclusive, and they actually depend on each other. But moving forward in a healthy and safe way seemed to be the thread that she was most interested in, and I did agree with her.
Right.
Thank you. Doug Jones?
Okay.
I will pass to, just noting the time. Mr. Suso.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I just want to welcome Nancy Taylor as the newest member of Falmouth Select Board. Nancy, heartiest welcome. Looking forward to working with you as town manager.
Thank you very much. And I really thank your office. They have been amazingly supportive and helpful.
And it's not just because you're new. They actually, it's not a honeymoon period. This is how they are all the time.
They're great.
It's amazing how quickly they get back on, all the questions we throw at them every day. And when we've misplaced, the copies they've made for us, they're just it's just a great group of people. So
It seemed like it.
With the charter review, we are the select board now, right?
Correct.
Yes, that's
Officially
right.
in the Select board.
Officially.
I might say that when questions come up that we can't answer as select board members, you can refer them to Diane Davidson and Phyllis. They're very good at following up on things like that.
That's terrific.
Definitely.
Service is the only business we're in.
They do a really great job.
Yes, they do. Thank you.
Do we want to
Anything
consider,
else?
just
Go ahead.
want a suggestion for our next meeting? Will we want to consider possibly earlier than next Monday to have a meeting to discuss what might be our plans for using our option now to make a new plan for restaurants to open and seating areas and so forth? Now that we have
Well,
this ability?
Yeah. So I think what's going to have to happen is that is Frank still with us? No. Okay. So why don't we get a little bit more information as to, I want to let Frank and Irie take a look at what the governor signed so that we can see. I personally have not viewed it, so I want to know what the process is.
Right.
Because my guess is there may be an individual petition that the restaurant has to put forward. So I think we want to make sure we give guidance. So I don't know. So let's just see what, we'll ask Frank and Irie to try to do a read through tomorrow, Julian, if we could ask them to take a look at whatever the governor signed, if it's available.
Certainly.
And then we can address that, Doug.
Okay.
See what it requires of us. Yep, Julian?
One other item, Madam Chair, on your tentative schedule that Diane maintains for the month of June, on the 22nd, we were anticipating the significant interview process for boards and committee for reappointments and new appointments. Yes. And if it's agreeable to the board, we would just move that forward to the 15th rather than have a conflict on the 22nd.
Yes, correct. That's right. Now that we're going to use the 22nd for town meeting, potentially.
Okay, and I'll also note, also on your tentative schedule was a potential summertime retreat for the last Monday in June. So I just tossed it back out there to think about. I mean, at this point, obviously, it would be a virtual gathering, but if the board wants to just double check your schedules and see if that Monday evening, I believe that's the 29th.
It is.
Would be agreeable, we can begin to put that further in motion.
Are people comfortable with that?
Certainly consider it.
Okay.
I do want to support Doug's idea, though, of holding a special meeting if all of a sudden we have a proposal that looks promising, because I think we need to try to expedite getting businesses at a higher revenue.
If we could do it before the weekend, maybe they could do something.
Well, I think the problem is they can't do anything until the governor makes his announcement on Monday.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean, I agree. I think we need to be doing the foundational work to figure out what's going to be required. We have to get that okay from the governor on Monday, and then we can kind of hit the ground running.
Doug's point is if we had considered having an emergency meeting on the 10th on Wednesday, that could then have that weekend where they could actually start doing something.
Planning
okay.
further.
I'm sorry, Doug. I thought you were talking about this week. I misunderstood what you were saying. I understand what you're saying now. I thought you were talking about having another meeting this week where we don't have the go ahead from the governor. So you're saying.
I'm just saying as soon as possible, if it takes a special meeting, I think we should do it.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Yep, great. So we'll definitely do that as we get some more guidance from the state. Great point. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for clarifying. Sorry, I didn't understand that.
Thank you.
Anything else from anyone else?
I move we adjourn. Jones?
Okay.
Patterson, second.
Okay, all those in favor? English Braga, aye. Patterson?
Patterson, aye.
Brown?
Brown, aye.
Taylor?
Taylor, aye.
Jones?
Jones, aye.
Great. Thank you to everyone. Thanks to our folks in IT for managing all the different slides. Really appreciate it. Good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.